We're going to call this workshop to order at 1:01, and we are in the Joe N. Idolette Teacher Education Center. And the purpose of this workshop, this is our typically called Superintendent Workshop, but the time is going to be utilized for review with our superintendent search firm, Hazard Young. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Moxley to introduce our guests.
Great, thank you very much. Board members, welcome back for our afternoon workshop session. And Mrs. Barenborg is on the line with us. Welcome, Mrs. Barenborg.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay, and we know we'll be listening for the bell. So we want to spend our time together as a kind of a planning session, if you will, to plan the process and the timeline. And I'm going to immediately turn it over to Dr. Adams, who will walk us through. We have, I think, several deciding factors and calendaring and things like that.
Well, first of all, thank you and good afternoon. And it's nice to be back here with all of you. Please do not be concerned about the number of items on the agenda. Many of them should go very quickly, and then some will require a lot more discussion. And we'll try to focus on those. First question that I have, did anyone have difficulty getting into the portal, and has everyone gained access to the portal?
I only got my little password card today. I assume that came from you. You may be talking about different things, never mind.
I received the email and was able to get in, no problem, thank you.
Okay.
Dr. Adams, I did have a question, and I wanted to bring this to the board's attention too. I'm hoping that we can give access to that portal to Mrs. Esplin. So do we have any board members that would object to that? Okay. So can we make sure that she gets that?
Not a problem at all.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Okay.
Is there any need to go through any kind of demonstration with the portal? Otherwise, I'll be following the agenda that's posted as well as the one that was sent by email. And it will only be necessary to go on the portal for any documents that we may refer to. One would be advertising, one would be due diligence, and other than those, we'll pretty much work from the paper document and the one that's posted.
I think we're here. I mean, I think it would benefit us to walk through it if it doesn't take that long. I mean, we have the time now.
No, it doesn't. If everyone has the portal up, the first thing that I would suggest or would just discuss with you, that on the right side you have the proposal that was submitted. You have our executed contract that is now has been executed, and then I would go to the engaged deliverables, which is the planning meeting agenda. So the agenda that's posted would be is the same agenda that's here on the portal, and that's why we talk about trying to do as much as possible paperless. But as we follow that agenda, when it comes time to look at the advertising schedule, you can go click the advertising schedule on. That'll come up, or if it drops into your downloads, you just hit the download and it'll come up. If you all want to just go into that planning meeting agenda, just hit it and it should come up. I may be working a little slower than you because I'm working off of a hotspot, not your...
My computer just took forever, so, yeah.
Okay.
I got in.
I'm
Mine
still,
went away. Isn't it good for you? I have to make up for that.
If
Not
you
brilliant
hit the
comment.
planning meeting agenda, if it's a Word document, then you have to go to your downloads and just pick it up under download.
Got it.
catch up in about 20 minutes, we'll see.
This is why I like my Mac.
I didn't bring it, I know. I didn't know we were going to use it.
I always bring it. I never travel anywhere without it. Here I am. Okay, we'll be waiting on you. Good
goody two-shoes here. You know what, I'm just going to follow along with you. How about that?
That's what I was
Alrighty, there we go.
If I could email
If you click on agenda, anything that's a Word doc will go into a download, and then just go to your downloads and you can pull it right up.
Yeah. Just very prepared.
Yeah, I have the agenda. I can't even get onto the open computer.
Well, everybody can look online
Okay.
if they want. Agenda.
With that, let's go to some of the easier ones. The first thing we ask is, who is our board liaison contact?
Are you asking?
Yes.
What do you typically see?
Generally, it's the chair.
Okay. So, I mean.
Well, the only concern that I would have with that is that the chair may change. So unless you continue to be chair in November, which is very well maybe the case, is that an issue if you switch mid-search?
No, we generally communicate with all, in this case, all 5 board members for almost all communication. Most communication is going to be on the portal. Sometimes something may come up that we need some direction, and so we'll go to the chair, and then the chair will direct, you need to contact the entire board, or this is what our protocol is, and this is what we can follow. So it doesn't matter. We just ask that a person be designated so that we're not calling all 5 of you if there's one of those things that come up.
And even if the board chairperson were to change, the person on the board doesn't change. That
That's true.
doesn't mean that, so I.
They couldn't continue to act as liaison.
Yeah, so I don't think that's a problem. Unless there's any reason, Mrs. Zork, that you don't want that in addition to your other responsibilities. I just want to give you an opportunity if for any reason you don't want to be that
Right.
person.
No, I just wanted to leave it to the will of the board, board members. I'm
Why,
here.
she's got the big title.
So.
fine.
Okay.
All right. The second
Actually, your
liaison.
title's longer. I just
You can
thought
handle
of
it.
that.
We're good, we're good.
The second liaison that we like to identify is someone in district that will work with, or sometimes it may be the person in a position and then the admin for things like scheduling meetings, scheduling locations, and so forth.
Could we volunteer Mrs. Esplin? Is there any reason it wouldn't be her?
You can use Mrs. Esplin, you can use Peggy Poisel, either one of them. I don't know what her workload is, but Peggy is also available to do that as well. So it's your choice.
I say Nancy. I mean,
If that's okay with you, or would you?
Again,
No, our point of contact's Nancy, so.
Mrs. Esplin.
it does not matter. It's just, there's going to be a lot of scheduling and a lot of logistics. And so that's why it doesn't matter. It does not matter. Both Nancy and Peggy are very capable of doing it. I was just looking at the amount of attention to minutes and agendas and things that she had to do, that if it required a lot of logistics, that maybe you wanted a second person and not take her off that. But it's purely who you feel comfortable with.
She feels she can handle
Mrs. Esplin, do you,
I think what Dr. Moxley is explaining, like workload-wise, it may benefit us to use Mrs. Poisel.
okay.
Because like she said, with keeping up with current meetings, minutes, and then all the additional meetings that will be forthcoming in the minutes.
But you need to feel comfortable who it's with. That's the most important thing, that if you're more comfortable with Nancy as the board executive assistant, then that's where it needs to be. And then we'll work around the other workload.
Okay. Can I make a recommendation? Let's go ahead and ask, or have Mrs. Esplin take it on, and if at any point she feels that she's being overloaded or not completing her other work, then I will welcome her to come to us and let us know that. Okay?
Would the board be comfortable if we communicate, and it's mainly scheduling, with your exec, and if we copied Peggy and Dr.
That'd be
Moxley.
perfect.
And that way, we won't, nothing will fall through the cracks, and the official liaison will be your exec. Okay, thank you. And from the HYA, you have our contacts, certainly either through the chair or any board member that wants to reach out to either me or Dr. Brown. Our on-site person in Schaumburg is Danielle Martell, that's our project coordinator. I can say for the next item, the contract has been executed. Thank you, and that's in place, so we can move on from there. Is there any desire to further review the search process other than what we described? When we talk about the calendar later on, we will be talking about the process and how it fits in. But are there any general questions about the process before we do that?
No, I just wanted to say thank you for the additional 2 days of consulting in the contract. It was suggested by board members it was suggested by board members that we ask for that, and we thank Hazard Young and Associates for obliging.
Oh, thank you. And we're coordinating, we'll coordinate calendar certainly to make that happen, and it will provide some opportunity for greater stakeholder input. The confidentiality of the process, Florida limits greatly what that is. We actually have, and I can tell you this, although it was just put up on our website, there are 6 applications that have been started. Only 1 has actually been filed, and that's very important to note. I just looked, I saw 6, but 5 are not submitted. We put right on the application that when you submit the application in Florida, it is a public record at the time of submittal. And so that's pretty much how the process will go. Most of the information, as it goes up in the portal, will almost become public information at that time as well. Is there any question on the confidentiality part of it?
No, sir. We're good.
When we get to calendar, we'll talk about times for board member interviews. We would like to spend, if at all possible, face-to-face at least a half hour with each one of you. And do ask the question. We can, depending on, Dr. Brown and I will both be available during most of the time. Probably the only time that we have to be or should be at the same meeting is for a public, the big public forum, so that we can keep minutes and so forth. But as far as the board member interviews, we can schedule them at your convenience. Probably this is the best site because it is dead center in terms of the county. And we'll provide multiple times, both during the day and early evening, for whatever works to accommodate your schedules. And we can talk specifically about that as we look at the calendar, if that works.
Perfect.
There was one person with a proposed calendar that said they were not available on September 4th. And that's not a problem. We certainly can work around that, and we'll talk about those things. The next thing, and this is probably one that...
Yes, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Back at number 4, the review search process.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to go through, I think we kind of just quickly went through. Are we going to actually go through this process in depth, what the search process is? Because it says here that there's a flow chart in the agenda. I don't see a flow chart.
Flow chart is on the portal, and the flow chart is also in the original document that
Are we going to review that?
we
Or
can't.
is that just us to read? Or are we just
We
gonna read that?
certainly can if you want. We did, and when we did our presentation, we did go over that
That
flow
same
chart.
one?
But
Okay.
if you'd like, we can certainly go over it again.
Can we get through everything and then,
Yeah.
like, things like this, if we have time, we can come back to this? Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay.
One of the things that we really should be spending some time on today are identifying the focus groups and the people in district that you want both focus group meetings, individual interviews, and then a larger group community meeting. And that's, as we look at number 7, the list here is just a suggested list. It's a beginning list. There's some groups you may want to involve, some that you may not want to involve. There may be an expanded list that you would like us to move forward with. Generally, and we've already talked about scheduling meetings with each of you during the time that we're on site. Certainly to meet with the interim superintendent and your cabinet level people. We recommend individual interviews for those people. We recommend setting up times. We know that you can't have all principals or all assistant principals out of buildings, out of district at the same time, but recommend a time to meet with that group, which gives you building level input with people who have the feet on the ground. And then whatever groups of staff that you'd like us to meet with. So really, we need to hear from you on this, whether you want to work from this list, whether you have some other ideas at this point.
I think, go ahead.
Just two things that stand out to me at the moment. Excuse me, the principals and assistant principals. Are you envisioning a focus group with sets of those people? Or are you envisioning individual interviews?
More a focus group which would be representative to anyone that either could attend or that the group would elect to send to attend, more than individual with each
Principal meeting,
individual.
I mean, we have a principal meeting and assistant principals meeting where every principal of the school's there at every school. I mean, they come here. So could we arrange for that? I mean, that's a question for you.
Yes, yes,
Oh, okay.
we do. Yes, we do.
And we can do that.
We don't
Oh.
do principals and assistant principals at the
Separate.
same time.
Right.
We do them
That
as
was my
two
question.
separate groups.
That was my question. Okay.
So we could, when you look at the calendar, maybe if you're doing 2 days of different groups, we would have the principals on one day and the assistant principals on another, or we would do it in the afternoon. I mean, we'd have to, we
Sure.
fit it in to be appropriate.
In that, then, in those and all of these groups, I'm envisioning that you're conducting those focus groups, correct? So you're here on whatever day those occur,
Correct.
or some representative of how.
Yes.
So you would work your schedule around our principals, our scheduled principals' meetings.
What we'll do at the conclusion of this meeting, we'll come up with a set of matrix, and once you tell us the groups, we'll be sending it to your exec with copies, and then here's the blocks, and we'll have Dr. Brown will have me in one column, and then you'll just set up the meetings, and we'll either be at this site or wherever you send us at those times. We ask that if most of the focus groups are about 45 minutes, that you leave about 15 minutes in between. If we're traveling to other sites around the county, let's say from here to another meeting, give us an hour, but we'll put all of that in the set of actual formal directions.
And in your experience, is it productive or obstructive to have board members present at some of those focus groups?
We recommend for the focus groups in particular that board members not be present. You want the groups to be totally uninhibited. Even that question comes up with public forums. We've actually been introduced by the board chair or whoever the board selects at a public meeting, and the chair has said, "And I am leaving." And we've had other meetings where the board has sat in. We recommend that if you do sit in, that you not be a participant, that you listen. Again, because you want to hear, we're going to bring all the information back to you. And if you're more comfortable sitting in, fine, but we suggest you not participate. But with the focus groups, especially with the employee groups, we believe it's better that the board not actively participate.
And in your experience at the public meetings, do you find a difference when board members are present but not participatory, or if board members are not there at all?
It varies. I've seen some public meetings get pretty raw in terms of down where people are coming from when we're the only person there as a third party. But the public will generally, if the board member is not taking over the meeting or not responding, sometimes a member of the public may say something that I don't want to say offends, but a board member doesn't necessarily agree with. We ask that you not try to respond or not try to justify. Just let us bring back the information, and then from the information we bring back, or if you're there, or if it's being televised or whatever, you know, it just gives you another perspective.
All right, so may I? Do you have more questions? I'm sorry.
If it's televised, that would probably require it being here. But I guess part of the, and with due respect, because I am going to, I trust you you don't take things personally.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons, for me personally, can't speak for any other board member, that I might like to see some of those is to have my own take on what's happening, because I have a different context than you do. And I have a different read on certain things than you might. And I want to know that you're reporting to me, accurately is a strong word. I don't think you would ever intend to report inaccurately. But so that's what's encouraging me to ask these questions, because there is also, I say it all the time, but you know, the context matters, right? And there are things that could be said that for you would occur very differently than they might for me or another board member. Doesn't mean I'm going to get involved, but I might hear them differently.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
It's been my personal experience that in general, we're probably better to not go, to be honest with you. And I think that this probably isn't, this is my personal opinion, this isn't Dr. Adams' first rodeo. So while I think it may be informative in some ways for you as a board member in the future and decision-making to hear that, some of the things, I think it might be the detrimental side, it may be more detrimental to actually be there. 'Cause
It may
it'll
be,
inhibit-
and that's why I'm just
Right.
asking.
No, and I mean, I'm just giving you my opinion on it. If we could just move back to the focus groups, I'm just going to give my opinion on when we look at this list, some of the people that I think could be involved in this, and then other board members, if you want to share, may I go through this?
Are you speaking specific people, or are you looking for
I'm
other
looking at the
groups?
groups. I'm just looking at the groups. I'm just going to run through the list. We have the list in front of us. You asked for input. Would you like the input?
Sure.
Okay. This is my, again, personal opinion. I obviously don't speak for the board as a whole. Teachers union and support staff union leadership. I would imagine that they should be included, and they should be able to give some feedback about some of the things they're looking for, as well as open teacher forum, inviting any teachers to come and share information with you. I see that at the a little bit lower, teachers, an open meeting for any interested teachers. I don't know about students. It's an interesting group to ask an opinion of. I'm not exactly sure, you know, what the feedback would be. I don't, you have them listed, so.
Often, we get some of the most honest perspectives
From students?
from students. One of the things that are sometimes done in some districts, especially county district, is to have student leadership groups. In Broward, we actually met with an auditorium full of student leaders from every one of their high schools and middle schools. And what was uplifting to us as consultants was to hear the students, and we always ask a question at the end of the process: is there anyone you would recommend we reach out to? And, you know, provide a name, and we'll contact the person. That doesn't mean that they get any different preference or treatment, but to hear students actually name a teacher, a coach, that meant something different in their life. You get a perspective of the culture of the school district from students. We actually encourage them to participate in the survey.
So I would think that would be awesome, then, have students participate. That would be, I think, to do something with students. PTA or PTO, I think PTA, County Council PTA, sending something out to all PTAs at schools to do an open meeting, and maybe they can utilize this building to invite any, you know, PTA members that might like to come out. I don't know if that's a part of a parent meeting or not, but, you know, perhaps it's somehow, maybe County Council PTA can help facilitate that meeting for you. And as far as business leadership, I imagine you mean like the chamber, working with the local chambers, or?
Often the chamber or chambers, sometimes we'll do it through Rotary groups. Whatever the vehicle is, sometimes if they're, you know, if this were Martin County, it might be some of the industries, you know, anything around aerospace or, you know. So often the chambers are one way to do this.
So chambers and Rotary, I think that's a really smart way to go about that. One thing that you don't have on here, but that's a part of our strategic plan, is strategic partnerships. So I would imagine we have a list of community partners that we work with, that do work in our schools with our students, or that help us to fund services or those types of things. So I would imagine a meeting just specifically with our strategic partners that we currently work with. That would be one that I don't see here. Governmental leadership, is that local elected officials?
Generally, it's your local, your county officials. Sometimes it's your state representatives. Again, it depends on the relationship and how involved the school district is with those entities.
So the only thing that I don't see here is the strategic partners. I would like to, you know, I mean, I'd like to have the strategic partners be a part of the focus groups, specifically one with just strategic partners. And then a community forum, we have in the past, Dr. Adams, had trouble having good turnout at some of our community forums that we've had. So, and especially when we're here, this location is an interesting location because it seems like it's central to everyone, although maybe it's like the least convenient for everyone. I don't know whether it's, you know, but when I've attended forums in other places, sometimes the Heritage Center downtown in Vero Beach seems to be a well-attended venue. But I know you've talked a little bit about having it, to do something at the community center in Gifford, at the Heritage Center downtown, and then perhaps at the IG Center, just something, if we're going to do community forums, just to break it up a little bit. I don't know, just a thought. Sebastian always does feel that they are a somewhat underrepresented group of people. And so just to be mindful of that as we move forward, that perhaps we make sure we reach out to the Sebastian Chamber or the Sebastian leadership to make sure that they have a voice.
These focus groups are included in the 6 days, is that right?
Correct.
So have you had success? How many typically in a day focus groups would you estimate? In your experience, have you had?
It really depends on the number of groups that you identify that you want us to meet with. Sometimes, for instance, if we're on site fewer days, then we would say, then make larger focus groups, expand who we'd meet with. There's an opportunity because there's the equivalent of 6 days, and what I'm thinking of is perhaps when we get to the calendar, if we follow that calendar, is to start on a Tuesday afternoon and evening, and then run all day Wednesday, all day Thursday, all day Friday into the late afternoon, and not use Friday night, but use Tuesday night to pick up that time. We'll probably show at least 8 slots within each of the days for each of us. So that's 16 slots a day times 3 days. So we can cover quite a few. We're here, so we're not here to use the beach. So, and I don't say that.
Beach,
yeah,
Dr.
I
Adams.
understand that.
Get
But I
a
don't.
vacation day in between.
I don't say that facetiously, but if it's desirous because a group cannot meet at any other time, we'll meet with them at 7:30 a.m. or 7 a.m. And if it's desirous because we need to meet with a group at 6:30 p.m. or 7 p.m., we'll do that. That can be done the same day. Would we prefer that it be like an 8 to 10 hour block? Sure, but we realize that we have 6 consultant days, and we'll try to get in all the groups you identify.
So with school board interviews, would school board members have our focus group included in our interview? Is that how it works? So there isn't a separate day for the focus group, or is a focus group separate from the interview?
Well, the focus groups, interviews, and community forums are all going to be within those slots. So there's 16, roughly 16 slots per day.
Okay, I
That-
understand. Now I'm seeing it.
Yeah.
I'm a visual learner.
Yeah,
now I-
so the board is not a focus group. The
Gotcha.
board individually, we're going to meet with you.
Right,
If
that
we-
was my question.
Sure.
Because we're here listed as a focus group or a suggested focus group. So I just wanted to
No, this is
kind of
just,
clarify. Okay, this just, and of course, the superintendent. So we don't really have to, right? I mean, you have regular interviews with the superintendent.
we have had numerous conversations already,
Okay.
and they've been very, very helpful.
You taking up our time, Dr. Moxley?
And what we would like to suggest is that the superintendent and your cabinet senior people get individual interviews
Yes, okay.
rather than as a focus group.
So I would suggest, looking at this list, that your recommendation for the superintendent and district-level administrators,
Assistant superintendents, right?
well, we have other district-level leaders that not necessarily have to be assistant superintendents. I mean, our focus groups can be a combination of different people.
Right, but for one-on-one
Our
interviews, it would
ex-
be senior leadership, right?
Yes.
I'm sorry?
For the second question was, for one-on-one interviews, it would be senior leadership. We're
This is
suggesting,
focus group, not one-on-one interviews.
This is a combination. Some of it is interviews, some of it is focus
Okay.
groups.
Is this the conversation that we have to decide which district-level administrators? Or is this just a generic
this is
conversation about overall district-level administrators?
This is generic, but what we suggest when we send out the matrix so that your staff can move forward, that they pretty much have a sense. I mean, we would suggest in terms of cabinet level that, your chief financial officer, your HR person, that are probably part of the cabinet, the superintendent's cabinet, have individual interviews. They could be, and here's where things cross over, they could be a focus group. Again, we try to get as pure and as open communication as possible. With
Dr. Adams, considering that we have an interim superintendent who's quite experienced, I would imagine that
Can I
you would
please
work
finish?
with Dr. Moxley to identify the leadership that would be interviewed. Does that seem appropriate?
It's really whatever your choice is. I mean, I do have a question at the very end of my interaction.
Okay, I'd like to go back to my comments and my questions, please. So I think, okay, now understanding a little bit deeper, I think cabinet members should have individual interviews. I can see the purpose in that, the importance of that. But just in general, district-level administrators, I believe, should have a focus group, some input, principals, assistant principals, support staff and teachers, or support staff union leadership and teacher union leadership, although I'm not sure how support staff, will the support union leadership speak on behalf of the support staff? No, we just want a select group to come and be their own focus group.
I'll let Dr. Adams say how they've done it in the
Yeah.
past.
There's two ways you can do it. You can simply, we can simply meet with all support staff, or you have something open for all support staff. Often, if there is a bargaining unit, we'll meet with the bargaining unit leadership, and then we'll have a meeting with the support staff. It depends on, and even how you define support staff. We would look at certificated support staff as being possibly in with your teachers. Often your school nurses, your librarians, your counselors are part of the same group as teachers. It all depends on, and then you'll look at your support staff who are non-certified, your admin assistants, your clerical staff, your secretaries, your custodians.
CWA. That's our CWA workers are classified as that, the support, what you're describing.
Yeah, often classified. Sometimes we'll meet with transportation separately. It's amazing when you talk to bus drivers, and
Yeah.
especially in this day and age where you don't realize that sometimes some children are dropped off at different locations, different days of the week, dependent upon what custody arrangements there may be, et cetera. And so sometimes they become, they're very important people in the lives of children, so.
I have I think students might be an interesting group to hear from. I'm not quite sure about former board members. PTA, definitely. I think we should get charter school representatives in in a focus group as well, instead of private school representatives. I agree with the strategic partners that we have a relationship with. Clergy association, I'm kind of thinking that we would invite some clergy or local business owners or specific groups to the community forum, right? Because that's open to the public. Can we offer an invitation for select groups to come to the community forum?
That's frequently done.
Okay.
It's frequently done where rather than have a separate focus group for a group, there would be a targeted invitation to the community forum.
Okay. And I think anyone else other that you have on that last bullet that we may think of later on, we could probably invite to the community forum. Yes, thank you.
At what point, and by what process, would you like specific recommendations for community groups, strategic partnerships? I'm sensing that this is not the moment to voice those. This is a general overview, and at some point, we would be solicited to tell you exactly the people we think should be involved.
The sooner we identify the specifics, the faster we can move the process forward in terms of the calendar that was developed to meet those timelines. So we would like to get as specific as possible. Now, often the board will give, as you've been doing, you'll give groups and how you'd like those groups handled. And if there's a general consensus with that, you'll say to your exec or Dr. Moxley and her team, okay, this is what we want. Get these people, pick out if it's the Chamber of Commerce, do you want to identify the person on the chamber you want us to reach out to, or do you just want us to reach out and they'll set it up? So
do you want me to give you specific recommendations now, or is that's what I'm not clear about, or is that going to happen at a later date?
Perhaps we could submit them to Dr. Moxley, and then she could correlate.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
That's what the process I'm trying to understand, how that's going to work.
Because he can set the calendar, and then we can shoot toward a goal to try to have him those individuals'
How are we going to
names.
get those individuals or those organizations to him? That's what I'm trying to find out. Are we voicing that in a public meeting, or is it coming through Dr. Moxley? Are they going to send us emails? How's that going to happen?
Can I give you my preference?
Sure.
Is that now that we have, if we all agree, yes, we want to have this focus group with this group, is that we send them to Nancy and she puts together the list.
Yeah.
And then maybe at one of our next board meetings, we can review the list during
Got it.
discussion.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to get at, is at what point are we going to submit those names, and how are we going to reach consensus on that? That's what I'm trying to get
You're
at.
going to see a lot of overlap, right?
Of course we are,
Yeah.
but that's the point. That's,
Yeah.
so what I'm trying to understand is the process.
Yeah,
We're
I
all going to
would-
say a lot of the same people, it's going to go through some process. How are we going to reach consensus that these are the groups we think are most important? That's what I'm trying to get at here.
So we can work to have that. I guess our goal would be, what's the 10th?
If I could speak here, we'd like you to reach consensus today, now, on what
That's what-
groups
Exactly.
you want
That's
us
what
to
I'm
meet
trying to
with.
find out.
The names are not important to us. Once you identify the groups, we'll send a matrix to Nancy and to Peggy and to Dr. Moxley, and they can fill in the names. If you don't like the names filled in, then you can change the names, but we don't get
Got it.
involved in that part of it. Tell us the groups, and so that
Okay.
they can start the planning process from there.
So if I could continue with some of the groups I'd like to make sure get included, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Now is the moment to mention those.
Yes. Not specific, like I said, strategic partnerships. I don't think we need to go through and name every strategic partnership we want right now.
No.
That's not necessary.
not
It's
what
just
I'm-
identifying strategic partnerships, union leadership, and then later that stuff will get filled in. Is that my understanding, Dr. Adams?
Yes.
All right, well, I'm going to be slightly more specific because I don't know what category, what I'm thinking of is. But there's, for example, the NAACP and after-school programs, the Daisy Hope Center, the Boys and Girls Club.
Those are strategic partners.
Well, that's my point. I don't know who you're including as strategic partners. That's what I'm trying to get
I
at.
had NAACP, Boys and Girls Club,
GYAC,
GYAC.
leadership,
Crossover Mission, Learning Alliance.
yeah, all of those people. MCAN, which is
Yeah,
Learning Alliance.
Ed Foundation.
Yes, Ed Foundation. Yep. We have a list of of strategic partners. I mean, we have a whole list that it would go out to.
Right, and I'm not sure who's on that list.
Oh, I'm sure someone.
So I haven't seen that list, and I didn't know that list existed until
Well,
you just
that's
said
why I
it.
said, let's all submit our list to Nancy, and she can coordinate it or put it in.
And then she can send it back out, and we can, if we miss anybody, then we can add it.
But we can't do that yet. We're going ahead of a step because Dr. Adams just said that they're going to now create a matrix, send that matrix to Nancy, and then with that matrix, then we fill in our names on that matrix. Is
That's
that
not how
right?
I heard it.
That's how I understood it.
I'm hearing,
Let's
I'm
let
hearing a couple
him-
different things here.
Okay, Dr. Adams, tell us again.
Okay. Once you identify the groups, we'll be providing a matrix and some guidelines on how to schedule us. As I said, for focus groups, about 45 minutes. For individual interviews, about a half hour. Within approximately 16 slots per day, 8 per consultant. And that gets done in district. So it's to give a guidance. I'm going to do a set of minutes based on the 18 items on this agenda, and we'll just come out and we'll say, for instance, liaison identified, and we'll put the name down, and we'll send those to the full board and ask for a sign-off that this is what we talked about. We'll move forward from that, and the setting up of the meetings will be done totally in district.
So we can go ahead and get started with emailing Nancy our specific requests.
Sure.
Specific groups, people within each of those groups.
Yes.
That we would like to see as a focus group.
Either as a focus group or as an individual interview.
And then that list will come back to the board for public discussion to approve it, correct? This is not, because that's the part. So you're going to send us, we're going to send you, and either, what you said is everybody's going to sign off on it, but I'm not sure we can sign off on it until we've had a discussion about it, correct?
All we're going to do is send our version of the minutes to make sure we understood what the conversation was about. And generally, the board chair signs, yeah, this is what we talked about. Once you identify the general groups from here that you want targeted, then the blanks are going to get filled in by the district. I've not seen then something like that come back for board approval. It just, it slows the process down. Now, if you want to take a year, I mean, we can expand the process out. What we tried to do when we looked at the calendar was recognize a couple of things when we presented the calendar that we'll talk about later. One, that you have an interim under a 6-month contract approximately that's basically scheduled to be out of here at the end of the calendar year. We have a Florida legislature that's going to meet in January instead of March. So the whole budget process is going to be earlier. And the idea was to provide an opportunity for you to get the successor superintendent on site to be part of the next budget cycle and the next planning cycle. we can stop if each part of the process has to be, come back and discuss and approve, it will slow it down.
Okay. So this is a process you've done a lot of times, so you have a familiarity with it that I don't.
Sure.
So for me to understand, I'm not suggesting we have to go, and I'm certainly not meaning to be contentious, but for me to understand the process moving forward, I want to know how that works. And so this is something you've done hundreds, if not thousands of times, but it's my first time. So I want us to be clear about how that works among us, because what I'm trying to avoid is down the road, we have disagreement about what any of us thought was going to be the process, which then turns out not to be, which, you know, happens once or twice on
It's
this
going to
board.
happen anyway at some point. I mean, it's just
Right.
the way it goes.
So that's what I'm trying to get clear on. I'm not trying to slow the process down. I am not trying to be argumentative. I'm trying to understand how it works so that we as a body are clear going forward how this process is going to work.
Because it does play into this, I'm looking here at the calendar, and I know we're going to get to that, but we're talking about things right now that are related to the calendar. I feel like the calendar is a little bit aggressive because I'm seeing here interviews and focus groups week of September 2nd, starting September 3rd. Well, if we don't meet back until September 10th, we will not have time to talk about the community partners that we want to make sure that's a part of this, or, you know.
Right, so either we're talking about it or we're not, but let's be clear.
My question is this. This is what I don't understand. First of all, he has done this a lot. So we don't, I want to make sure we don't micromanage this process because I think it's important to allow them to do their work. We've been asked to identify important stakeholders, not specifically, but in groups of stakeholders that we feel will be that we would like to have their voices heard. And when you drive down into specifics, NAACP, Daisy Hope, all of those different groups, I would imagine that if all board members submit to Dr. Moxley and Nancy a list of the stakeholders, the specific stakeholders they would like, that they can be sorted into, and then to say, I think this should be an interview, this should be, this should be a one-on-one, this person could be included in a focus group, whatever it is, that they'll be able to shake out where these people fit into which focus group. And when you say a matrix, you mean a schedule, right?
Yes.
For every day, 16 meetings every day. I would imagine you split the room in two, and maybe you're back to back to back, you're doing these meetings.
Correct.
But, at some point, we're going to have to, give and let God, what is the expression? At some point, we're going to have to say, these are the people we'd like included, go forth and make it happen. Because the last thing I want to do is to slow down the process. And I do think it's aggressive, but I think it's important that it's aggressive. And I love the idea of the fact that we're shooting for a superintendent start in January for this budgeting process. Let's not micromanage something too much.
No, and I'm not suggesting that we micromanage, but it just, we have to answer for every decision that's being made, and if we don't know what decisions are being made, I don't feel like that we're doing our job in this process. And this is the most important decision that we'll have to make, is selecting this next superintendent. And I just feel like this calendar is just way too aggressive, and I'm not feeling comfortable with it. Go ahead.
I agree on some of these areas on this calendar. As an example, we have on this calendar next week, September 2nd, starting September 3rd, interviews and focus group meetings. That's Monday. We're here, we haven't even received the matrix yet to fill any of the names in, but I just don't think that next week is time enough. Maybe the following week.
Whatever week you choose
Yeah.
is fine. The matrix isn't going to come back to you as a board. The matrix
It's
is
going to come
simply
individually, I understand.
is a calendar that we're just going
Yeah.
to, it's a calendar. So I don't think that it was ever intended that every calendar comes back for the board to approve. You
No.
would approve the major, I just wanted to make sure, we talk about a matrix. To me, the way it was described was a matrix that was gonna have a calendar of different, here's Dr. Brown, here's Dr. Adams, and times, and whatever week that happens to be would be filled in, but that would not have to take board approval to approve that before that calendar were executed, unless I've misunderstood, because we might be a year down the road before we get through the whole process.
Right.
I just think we need to be very, and maybe, I don't know, but I am hearing a lot of process questions coming up. That,
Well, I'm also in my mind, I know that we have a tropical storm heading straight toward Indian River County too, and that's that week.
Don't jinx us, Laura.
But, you know, I
And,
just.
Yeah, if
I'm-
not that one.
When I look at this, where I'm really not seeing the comfort level is the interviews and focus groups that week, you know?
sure.
If somehow we can, that just, to me, is too soon.
Are you, here's my question, I'd say. I'm ready
okay.
for an interview, but here's my, if you went to Crossover Mission or Ed Foundation, it may be a scheduling thing, but they want to be a part of this process. If you said to them, can you give us a time next week that you're available to come in and talk, or here's your time next week to have your input heard, or week after, fine. I think people are ready to do it. I mean, I don't know what, I guess I'm not understanding why people know we're in the middle of a search, they know we've started a search, and we're gonna say to them, here's your opportunity to have your voice heard. Why do we need to delay it? I don't understand.
And one of the things for today is this was meant to be a roll up our sleeves and get the pre-planning done. That's what the outcome, if you talk about a deliverable at the end of a meeting, the deliverable at the end of this meeting is to have, here's who's going to be part of the focus groups, here's who's going to be interviewed. Dr. Adams frankly asked for an hour and a half. We have 3 hours scheduled. I think that, I'm saying
No,
that
I'm
to
sorry.
be, that we want to get work done. This was work time for you with the consultant who is an expert, and not to brush over anything. You have very valid questions, and I wanted to make sure you had the time to ask the process questions because to be honest with you, you want to be as inclusive as you can, and then we structure, meaning we, he being the consultant, working with Nancy, will then chunk it. Now, whatever time you want, whatever week, then we get it advertised, we get it out there, whatever. We just want to make sure that it's a time when we don't have a lot of massive events going on, and we know, and I know that was one of the conversations next week was pretty small and things being done because we already got a lot of the open houses, but it really can be any time.
Well, and if I could add to that, I know for myself, when I get a notice of a meeting happening in 2 days or 3 days, I am often not available because my schedule is planned out in advance of that. And so the more, I'm not suggesting we extend it by any great length of time, but I do think it's fair and appropriate and considerate to give people enough time because this is something they really want to participate in. And to say, if you're not here next Wednesday, you've missed it, I feel is disrespectful of the community. So I do want to, I appreciate you saying now is the moment to dig in and make sure that we get the representation we're after, the schedule we're after, because this is it. This is the time we have.
So,
And I don't want to give short shrift
Partners
to.
are, we know that. I mean,
so I'm comfortable with starting on September 9th, which is just 1 week, 1 week.
Does it, is it typically only 1 week long? Within that 1 week, the goal is to have all of the focus groups and interviews taken care of?
Yes.
Okay.
The most economical way for you and for us is to do it all in the same week, and for a couple of reasons. Aside from cost, the other part of it is the promoting the idea. This is when we're doing it, because we also do it in conjunction with having the survey up. So it is important to do it all at the same time. We did look initially at the following week, and one of the reasons I looked at the week after Labor Day in your district, the only major thing happening is on Thursday, the 5th, you have 5 open house programs. So we were going to stay away from the evening of the 5th and try to have most of that day be earlier into the late afternoon. We had looked at Wednesday of that week probably being the best week for a community forum, probably right here, which is ideal because you can televise it then. So those that choose not to come, at least will be able to watch it. But we could go, if we went to the following, if we went to the following week, we could still make the September 24th presentation on the leadership profile. As I mentioned at the outset, there are 9 applications, or 6 applications in the catch, only 1 actually filed. Nothing's been done with that yet because until we have that leadership profile from you, the board, which you approve, we really can't actively recruit. Now, we'll post it, we'll accept applications, but we can't really start even vetting those applications because you haven't had the input from your community and ultimately your decision on the leadership profile.
Okay, I think, do I hear consensus? We're good with starting on September 9th, just not next week?
For the interviews
Just-
and the focus groups?
Yes.
Yes.
Because in a combination of having a holiday there and
No, I think
And
it's smart.
the
Stakeholder.
potential storm, because a lot of people go out, they travel if they think it's coming, and I just,
Yeah, no,
let's
that's
go
fine.
for the 9th.
Would you be willing to do, rather than 9, 10, 11, 12, which would give you Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of that week? It would just, from a scheduling, I'm looking at our scheduling standpoint. I can make it work if you want 9, 10, and 11 versus,
And when is the principal meeting? Is that
We
that
will,
week?
we will, no, we will schedule. We
To
will
make sure
schedule
they're
them
here?
to come in, yes.
Okay. I'm fine with that, Dr. Adams.
is that okay?
I like it. It's stakeholder week. We're going to get the survey out. We'll get all the interviews. There'll be a lot of buzz. We'll have time to promote it on social media.
I just want to point out the 10th is a board meeting night,
Yes.
so we would not be able to have a meeting that night here because you already have a board meeting.
You do
But you could do it 11th, right?
Yes.
But
Do
you
you-
can go out to,
You
if
can
you
do
needed to
anything
go
else,
to
yeah.
the Vero Beach PAC Center to do a town hall, or if you needed to go over to the Sebastian River, what is that called, the auditorium, you could host something there those nights.
And I think the municipalities and county commission, I think they'll be pretty good about, allowing us to use a space if you need a space. So Heritage Center, or any of those
And
things.
the good part about, the reason I mentioned Vero Beach High School PAC Center and the Sebastian Auditorium is they do have the access for the cameras, so it can be recorded
That's nice.
and then replayed. So,
We could send Chris, we can send them out to or they have to be here to do the board meeting, but yeah.
right. Go ahead.
Okay. With that said,
Up,
Bell?
just,
What-
what,
what-
1 second, Mrs. Barrenborg.
since we've got the dates for September 10th, 11th, and 12th, scheduled for the interviews and the focus groups, when should we all agree on a date by which we should give Nancy our specific stakeholders? Do you all want a particular
I would like
date?
to, before we leave today, to have that discussion because that drives everything.
We get a list then of the strategic
I've
partners.
sent
Thank you.
for
Oh,
that,
Thank you very
yes.
much.
Okay.
Okay.
So I know I gave my groups.
Let's come back to the.
Okay, so Dr., Mrs. Barrenborg, I'm going to have you speak, and then what we're trying to do is we're trying to narrow down the focus groups, and if
Dr.
you could
Moxley
speak
sent
to
for
that too?
Dr. Moxley just sent for the strategic partner list.
No, for her
I'm
input
watching and
of the
listening,
focus groups.
so I know where you are. The question I have is for Dr. Adams. The question is, they're talking about moving dates back. Are you talking about moving the interviews with the board members back, or is that still going to be next week?
No, of the interviews would take place during whatever time you designate. So if it is 10, 11, 12, then the interviews with the board would be on 10, 11, 12. With possibly, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, I have a conflict on the 12th. That's the only thing I have.
Okay.
Well, they could do phone. He said, there's a
It
thing
doesn't-
here that
There's
said.
2 other days, it's fine, and we're all here
I
on the
have
10th.
I have a conflict on the 12th. I cannot call in. So,
Okay.
that's
There
the
are-
only
there
date
are-
I'm asked not to stay away from, please.
There are
For
3
me.
other days.
2.
I mean, 2 other days.
Any other day, fine.
We'll do the matrix and get everybody's schedule.
And we'll do the same thing. If you're doing it 10, 11, 12, one of us will be available on the evening of the 9th or the late afternoon of the 9th, so that
Okay.
if we need to schedule an extra or accommodate somebody, we certainly can do that.
Is that it, Mrs.?
Okay.
Did you have
I
something else?
appreciate that. The other question I have is, we're talking about focus groups. We're not talking about individuals. Is
Right.
that correct?
Yes, we need to narrow that down.
So my thought would be, can we come, Dr. Moxley has sent for a list from Mrs. Poisel of our strategic partners that we work with in the district. If we could come back to number 7, maybe, Mrs. Zork, when we have that list in front of us, if we could come back to specific focus groups
Well, what
when we
we're
have
trying
that.
to do right now is identify the categories, and then we can focus on those.
Right. Oh, okay. Okay. I just thought we could come back to 7, but that's, so we can keep moving on, but that's fine.
Okay, with regard to,
Well,
oh, are we
she's
still
not
on?
finished.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
I
Mrs.
apologize.
Berenborg.
Well, that was my question was, I know we're going to get a list of the strategic partners, I think that's what we need to focus on is groups, not individuals. Because individuals be able to give their input in lots of different ways, in surveys and open forums and all different ways. So I think it's making sure that we're including all the groups that we want to include. I think that's our mission as a board. So thank you.
Okay.
On this list, I do want to echo switching private to charter. Our charter school representatives are probably more significant here than our, or at least in this discussion, than our private schools. I'd like to also suggest that we make sure that we include law enforcement in some capacity on this. I don't see them listed here. They may be part of one of these groups, but I think they are really important partners with us. And I want to toss up for conversation this former board members, how we feel about that, because that's on the list. And
I feel like my feeling would be former board members can come in a community forum if they'd like to be able to share their input, but I don't necessarily think that I want to see individual interviews with former board members.
I completely agree. Just wanted to have that conversation publicly
That's my
sit
personal
before since it's on the list. Okay, totally agree. So we can take former board members off the list.
And I don't know if that's necessarily important to have specific governmental leadership focus groups with county commissioners or mayors or different things. I think, again, that would be, if they'd like to have their voices heard, they could do so in a community forum.
Yep.
I'd rather have more time for parents and students and teachers and strategic partners.
Are you distinguishing, when you mean government leadership or business leadership, or are you putting that all together in one?
I was saying specifically governmental leadership. If you had I meant like county commissioners or mayors or other elected officials. I didn't know that they needed to be a separate focus group. I thought that perhaps they would participate in a community forum if they'd like their voices heard.
I think I disagree with you on that. I think that given our need to interact with those people generally, I think given some of the things that are coming before the commission and, which we'll talk about later tonight, before certainly the Sebastian City Council and maybe others, but I think those are important people for us to, as governmental leaders and decision makers, so our decisions impact one another. It could be a short focus group, but I do think we should reach out to them.
Would you want to do government and business leaderships together as one focus group, or are they too different?
I think they're
I
different.
don't know, yeah.
But I mean, if let's just say, for example, you had a county commissioner that wasn't in support of sharing sharing resources for SROs at our schools, well, I don't necessarily want Dr. Adams to take that advice under consideration. Do you know what I mean? I don't want that to be something that we look for, a superintendent who's going to take county.
Right. I agree,
Here's
but we
what
don't
I-
have to take, we can say, oh, that's interesting, they said it.
Okay.
It gives us, I
still don't think.
right, I don't think that would happen, but I know what you mean. But that doesn't mean that he's taking it under advisement for advertising. It means he's bringing it back to the board.
Well, and I just pose this as a question. I know that there are probably, was it 2 municipalities just hired their,
They didn't ask us.
their,
City
their
manager.
superintendent, right? And we weren't a part of that
No.
conversation.
I don't think it's necessary.
So,
That they didn't doesn't necessarily mean we shouldn't. And those people probably have kids in our schools, so we're a slightly different entity. I don't have, I mean, if
community
you,
member.
pardden
They're
me?
going to participate in a parent group or at a
Yeah, I
community
mean, if people feel strongly against this, fine,
It's
but I
not-
want to make sure that we consider it, because we do make decisions with those people. And as you even started last month, that interlocal meeting, I would hope that we'll have more of those on different topics that encourage us to collaborate and work together. So, just a thought.
All right. No, I mean, if time wasn't the,
Yeah.
the
And if they can't, they
issue-
can't, and if we don't, we
Right.
don't, but.
Okay, so your point's well taken.
Thank
Is that it? Did you have more?
No, that's it for now.
Okay. Can I go through how I've lumped them into groups? And I'm not going to go into the individual names over here to the left. You're going to do one-on-one interviews with board members is the way I'm seeing this. One-on-one interviews with the superintendent and her cabinet. The next layer would be you're going to do like a focus group with our principals, then you're going to do a focus group with our assistant principals. The next group I see is that as a focus group would be our teachers and support staff. The next would be parents, community members, community partners, and then a focus group with our charters, and also, while we're meeting with our charters, since there's only really 5, is to invite the private school leadership to that.
What private school?
Yeah, I don't.
What private school?
St. Ed's.
Well, we
No.
have,
St. Ed's is going through a search for their new leader, and I will guarantee you, we will not be at the table for that. I think charter school that was a great idea, charter school. As far as private school is concerned, I'm not interested in having any of their leadership be a part of this conversation. If they want to be a part of it, let them be a part of it through community interaction. I mean, we don't function with them. They don't have, again, the time is limited. I think the charter school thing is well taken.
charter schools, you might get 5 people to show up.
Okay, well
That's
then
all right,
do a
but at least we
5-person,
opened it
they are
up.
they are a group that we have to work with. So then it's a smaller focus group, 30 minutes, 45 minutes with 5.
Okay.
You invite their boards, they have boards. You might get more than just their leadership. You might
Okay.
get their board members.
So that is the way I envision it, and so that's.
What about business? Do you want to do something separate with the chambers, with Sebastian?
So I
have
Chamber or no?
community partners
Okay.
So here's what I
and
thought.
members,
I feel like strategic partnership and
community
team partners
partners.
are different.
Yes, you're right.
That's my thing. I just feel like they're different. Because like a strategic partner is like, to me, Mental Health Association, Crossover Mission, Daisy Hope, Boys and Girls Club. We're sharing information with them. We're doing things like that with them, programmatically. But, and then you might have like the hospital district, people that we're partnering with currently. But the community leadership or community partners or business leadership is a little bit different.
Well, community partners could also include the group you were talking about, Dr. Schiff, combined together.
Okay. You mean elected officials?
How was it, governmental leadership.
That I think is different too.
It is.
I
but
think
you
that's
can put them
different
together, though.
from
You could put them together.
community
Thank you.
businesses.
I agree.
I appreciate that.
You're welcome. That's my opinion.
Okay. So up until, you had me up until private schools. I think charter schools should be.
Okay, and I'm
Separate.
fine with that. Everybody put
Well,
out what they
you all,
wanted.
yeah, I'm just giving
And I'm
my.
fine.
Water on that fire.
I'm fine.
But with regard to businesses or business partnerships or community business partnerships or however you want to mention it, here's what I thought. Definitely strategic partners should have their own focus groups. But our business community, our clergy association, our chambers, former board members, and the other groups and organizations, the council with whom we are members, like the Economic Development Council and some of the other, groups that we participate in, I think all of those should be invited to the community forum.
The community, partners, and leadership. It's the way, it's exactly what I have envisioned is what you're saying.
Okay, but that is, strategic partnerships are separate.
Yes,
Okay,
exactly.
I don't want to mix those
Strategic
up.
partnerships are the relationships that we have almost every day with.
Our community partners are people such as clergy, the Pastors Association, business leaders, chambers, maybe the
Rotaries.
Veterans Council, former board members, and of course, all of those groups that we are a member of.
I think we're all on that same page.
And let's not forget law enforcement. I believe
That
law
was the one I
enforcement
didn't
should
hear
have
again.
their own focus group for sure.
They're on the strategic partnership list. I think law enforcement, that's an interesting thing. I think perhaps when you meet with Mr. Teskey as a district leadership, perhaps maybe having the two SRO leaders to be able to have a little bit of time after Mr. Teskey's one-on-one interview might be interesting, just so that they could, do you know what I mean?
You have to have
Where-
Mr. McMahon from the district, right? Because there's John Teskey, but he's head
Bender,
of
you
safety. Bender, sorry.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, maybe, I don't know. I don't know if it's necessary or not, to be honest with you. I mean, they're a
This-
strategic partner, I don't know.
This
So
particular list lists
Yeah.
this is all the strategic partners, and law enforcement's on here, so.
Yeah, I think that's strategic.
And NAACP is on here.
This might be not a 45-minute, this focus group might be a
Daisy
little bit
Hope
longer.
is on
And
here.
this might be, it might be appropriate to split this
Yeah.
up, because they have different interests and different input, and it might be more productive in a limited amount of time to categorize them.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, even if you did two to three different blocks of
I mean,
grouping
the
them.
Sebastian Elks is gonna have different concerns than, like, the sheriff's office.
This needs broken up because this is combined with with
Community, yeah. So the chamber here, we just agreed that the chamber would be invited to a community forum, not have its own focus group. So would you ladies want to go through this list one by one and just kind of identify which one should be invited to a community forum as
Yes.
opposed to its own focus group?
So S for strategic and C for community partner?
So,
Yes.
Okay,
I'm pretty familiar. You want me to go through it?
let's go.
All right, so if you go down the list, the first one that I'd see that you deal with students would be Big Brothers Big Sisters. That would be a strategic partner. Oh, she belled. She dinged. She doesn't have the list.
Yes,
Do you have the list?
Here,
Why don't we start it,
hold on a second.
oh,
Let's start with the very first.
yes, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Mrs. Barrenborg, the list that they're referring to is coming to you by email now.
So a Place for Hope would be a community partner,
Yep.
C, and then Cancer Center would be C. Well, you want to wait for Terry?
Why don't you say the whole name, why don't you say the entire name?
American Heart Association would be a C. American Red Cross would be a C. Big Brothers Big Sisters would be an S. Boys and Girls Club would be an S. Crossover Mission would be an S. Daisy Hope Center would be an S. Education Foundation, S. Executive Roundtable would be a C. Feed the Lambs would be a C.
Education Foundation.
I said S for Education.
Okay.
Gifford Youth Achievement Center would be an S. Habitat for Humanity would be a C. Hibiscus Children's Center would be an S. Indian River Club would be a C. Indian River County Chamber would be a C. Indian River County Emergency Services Department would be a C. Johns Island Foundation would be a C. Leukemia and Lymphoma Society would be a C. Local Law Enforcement would be an S. March of Dimes would be a C. McKee Botanical Gardens would be a C. Mid-Florida Credit Union would be a C. NAACP would be an S. Napier and Rollin Law Firm would be a C. Rotary Clubs would be a C. Salvation Army would be a C. Sebastian Elks, C. Supervisor of Elections, C. Tax Collectors, C. Taxpayers Association, C. The Environmental Learning Center would be an S. The Learning Alliance would be an S. Title Law would be a C. United Against Poverty would be a C. United Way would be an S. Vero Beach Centennial would be a C. Vero Beach Elks would be a C. Vero Beach Museum of Art would be an S. Vero Beach Recreation Department would be a C. And Veterans Council would be an S. They do programs in our schools. We have veterans in the classrooms. I mean, they are actively involved in our schools. I'm sorry? Yeah, they're actively involved with our students.
Okay, so that was quick. I'm glad we did this.
The only one I'm,
Is there any disagreement?
the only one is the Recreation Department. Do we do any programs directly with them?
They use our pools and things, but that's, I mean, in general, they're not involved in decision-making for strategic partnerships. We don't share information with them about students. We don't, our students, when they're there, are our responsibility, not theirs.
Do we coordinate transportation with them? Do we do after-school programs with them? Do we do anything with the district and their recreational programs? Just check.
The pool, they go and use the pool, that's it. But
All right.
they're,
So we should take that to a,
that was a C.
oh, it was, okay.
So, there's,
Anyone that you don't see on this list that you would like to see on this list of strategic partners?
It's going to take me a minute. I mean, I'm going to go back and look at some of my stuff, and then if I have anyone to add, I'll just email Nancy.
is, oh no, it's there, okay. And so are we envisioning that there is a focus group for the S's and a focus group for the C's?
I think so.
Is that too big? Does that need to be broken up? I'm asking Dr. Adams, does that need to be broken up any further, or those are that however it turns out, it turns out?
No, I think however it turns out, what happens, I can tell you recently in Beaufort County, we had 67 different groups over, and they paid for additional days. So we were there for a total of 8 days, 2 consultants, 4 days. And frankly, there were some sessions where people didn't show up. We were there for each of them. You're better off identifying them, offering them the meeting, and clustering them so that there's some meaningful dialogue. And the interest for strategic partners, the interests are similar, although they provide different kinds of partnerships and services.
Yeah, I mean, I think for strategic partnerships, when I'm looking at this, you're going to have an Ed Foundation or a Learning Alliance or one of those groups is going to really have more input for you. I would think when we do the S's for the strategic partnerships, that would be probably a double block of time. 45 minutes wouldn't be enough.
No, and I agree. I would hope that because these groups are so large, that typically they do turn out and they do voice their opinion.
The strategic
Is to make
partners,
sure
yeah, they
that
definitely
we
will.
Yeah, they will.
give them enough time. Mrs. Barrenborg,
May I
would
add
you
one
like
to
to
the list?
speak? Go ahead.
Can you add Children's Services Council to the list, please?
Yeah.
Children's Services Council.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Good one.
Children's Services Council, and what is the other one?
Kindergarten readiness.
Kindergarten readiness.
Yeah.
Early Learning Coalition. Are they
Mental
on
Health
there?
Association is
I
not
know.
on here.
Yeah.
There's going to be some that
Yeah.
we're going to think of. Mental Health Association needs to be added.
What is the Fellsmere,
FACT needs to be
Fact.
added.
Yes. What is the acronym? It's the Fellsmere Action Community
Team.
Team?
FACT. They would be a community, part, but yeah, there are going to be some that we're
The
going
other
to
ones are C's or S's. Children's Services would be a,
C.
Kindergarten readiness would be an S.
An S.
An Early Learning Coalition,
Early Learning Coalition
be an S.
would be it.
Childcare resources.
Is
Childcare
ELC on
resources
here?
would be a C or an S. I mean,
Environmental Learning Center?
I
Yeah,
don't
it's
s-
here,
Where?
right here on the bottom.
Environmental Learning Center was an S.
Oh, because it's with a T, not an E.
It starts with T.
Okay, so this is great. We got this. Let's,
Zork, you want to have it set a deadline by, let's say, Friday, that if there's anyone you want to add to this list for board members, that it needs to be submitted by the end of the week, or is that appropriate?
do we?
Oh,
I think we
Substance
should.
Abuse Center, Substance Abuse Awareness Center.
Yep, that would be a C.
Yeah, let's have this to Nancy by Friday, close at 5.
Okay, yes.
I
we can
don't
do
see
that.
them. Where are they?
Not on there.
Substance abuse, I don't see them on here either.
And the Scholarship Foundation of Indian River.
That would be a C. I mean, they provide scholarships, but they're not actively involved in partnering with us during the school year. with
The
our
substance
students.
abuse is an S. They do
Yep, yeah, you're right.
the,
it'd be an S. Life skills.
life skills.
Who was the one that was just discussed?
The Substance Abuse.
No, there was another
Behavioral
name.
The
health?
Scholarship Foundation of Indian River County.
Yes.
It's Awareness Center, yes, thank you.
Okay. Let's see what else we have.
All right, if we could move on to the community survey. And thank you. A good discussion, and you're getting into the spirit of what we need to do to make this move forward. And we can do that with some tweaks and those kinds of things. You all should have a copy from the original document. It's also on the portal of the sample community survey. And on that sample community survey, there are 14 categories. We can disaggregate to 6 categories so that you'll see from the survey which constituents said what and so forth from the survey, which we can then match against what you get in from the various focus groups and individual interviews. What we ask you to do is identify 6 from this list so that we're able to disaggregate to those groups. Just by way of background, as you look at those 14 potential categories, we can adjust them, although we don't customize the survey. We can customize the titles if that it better reflects what you're looking for here. We recommend that board members not be included as a separate category because you're going to all be interviewed, and why take and disaggregate what the 5 of you have said when you're going to have a consensus in a separate report on that. So you can do, it's often you look at your certificated staff or your teachers and support staff who require a license. Often you'll look at your non-certificated. You want to look at community members. It's often interesting in seeing parents or parents and guardians or parents sometimes and grandparents of students attending the school as potential for the 6 categories. So your thoughts on those, and I'd like to identify those 6 categories so that we can move forward with the survey.
Did I may have missed it. Never mind, got it. Yeah, sure.
If you don't have them up, the categories are administrator, board member, certificated staff member, classified staff, community member, employee, faculty, parent of a student attending school, staff, student, support staff, teachers/licensed staff, non-licensed. We recommend that you identify the 6 categories. And some people are going to say, but I'm a teacher and I'm also a parent. Well, what category do you identify with most? You can only pick one category. And we'll disaggregate so that you'll have the results of the survey not only collectively, but also by individual group.
Can you clarify for me, you want us to pick 6 of these roughly, I think there's what, 12, 10?
14.
14. And is there a reason that we need, Because they're going to all go out through one portal, right? And then people are going to self-select who they are. Is it that the categories become too small for aggregation, or is there a reason why we need to pull 7 and not do the total? And I'm sorry if you just said that and I missed it.
We will give you a total, to maybe better understand that. This is the results of an actual survey. And you have a hard copy of this. You'll get the total by all categories, and then we can disaggregate to 6 categories.
Got it. I see what you're
So, yes, you will see the total. Often, boards will want to see, well, what are our,
saying. Specific, I get it.
what are our teachers, counselors, and librarians and nurses saying in the survey? Because the survey is not just the ISLIC standards as far as what are you looking for in terms of the leader. It's also somewhat of a SWOT analysis of what people consider the strengths, the challenges or weaknesses, the opportunities and threats to the district. So you see that, your teachers may see that in one way, your administrators may see it in a different way, your parents may see it in still a different way. But you'll have the collective, this is what 1,000 people said, this is what 50 administrators said.
We'll have the total and then broken down into 7 smaller versions of that.
You'll get a report that looks just like this.
So if I could just, I'm going to just start throwing them out. So let's say we would do students. This is my opinion, and board members may disagree with me. I'm just going to, students, teachers, parents of a student attending school, so that's 3. Then you would have staff, which would be 4. Faculty and teachers is somewhat similar. Is faculty including administrators as well, or?
We just use the category because these are the most common. We can actually, if you use, for instance, classified staff, we can custom the title to whatever best reflects. So you may want to say teachers and certificated support staff, or teachers. Do you want to identify, for instance, your non-licensed staff? Different, or do you want, you can have staff or employee.
I don't want to make it complicated for people, because if they see classified, they may say, what does that mean? So I think that we should just stick with the titles that our community is familiar with, that our employees are familiar with. If they're support staff, it should just say support staff. If they're administrator, it should just say administrator. If they're teacher, it should say their teacher, just for the simplicity of it. If they're, well.
Jackie, did you agree? Can we all be in agree? Are we all in agreement that we want students to be on the list?
Yes.
Okay, and parents of students
Yes.
on the
Yeah,
list?
Yes.
and did you say you can make that parent/guardian?
Yes.
Yeah, there you go. Parent/guardian of students, so that's 2. Teachers, 3.
And you can take out the faculty and just make it teacher, or do teacher/faculty, correct?
If you
Because
like.
we don't really use, I mean, we
We
use
don't really use
faculty, but we don't distinguish. So,
Yeah.
so we would say teacher or faculty, we'd be more likely to say teacher?
Yes, teacher.
More likely
So
to
we could
just say
either take
teacher.
out faculty or do teacher/faculty.
So
Unless, do people identify as
No,
faculty,
no.
not
No.
teacher? Okay.
So students, parents/guardians of students, teachers, staff,
Administrators?
administrator, that's
Administrators.
5. Community member is 6. That's it.
Strategic partner?
No, I don't
As
think
long
you
as we
need to
get
separate it
7?
out. I don't know that I'd separate it out. I mean, they'd be community member.
Except,
Because you're asking them to self-identify as a strategic partner, and what we've said is we are identifying who our strategic partners are. We want to be the ones
for
identifying
focus
them.
groups, but in the survey, it's different. And the only reason I'm thinking this through is there are people, there are community members who have a different relationship and a different set of opinions than people who work directly with the board and the district as a strategic partner.
No doubt, but if we're identifying strategic partner, we need to be the ones, if we're
It says
using
what
that
they
term,
are.
we need to be the ones
Right.
defining what that means. I just don't want to muddy it by putting that
Right.
somewhere else.
We could say community member or community partner / strategic partner.
It won't really matter.
Because
if we're not making the
person-
distinction.
I don't want to,
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, if we're not making the distinction, then it's,
I'm good with the
sort of-
6th.
So what are we saying, community partner or community member?
Would you restate them? so we
Yes,
make sure
I
we
said
all have them?
students,
Students?
parent/guardian of student attending school, teachers, staff, administrators, community
community.
members.
Okay.
Support staff or staff?
Staff.
Staff, I think. Non-instructional staff.
Non-instructional staff.
Non-instructional staff.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
All right, community member, administrator, parent or guardian of a student attending the schools, students, teachers, non-instructional staff.
Administrators, did you say administrators?
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
so what's, moving on to,
9.
oh.
The rest of the survey just stays as is? The rest of the survey stays as is?
Yes.
Who will be the liaison? Will that be Greg McDonald? Or will that be the lady, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting her name. Lori Webb?
We'll work through whoever, through Nancy and to whoever the tech person is that would do the link, rather than reach out separately for that. And we're working with one person in district or between the team of the superintendent's office and your exec.
Okay,
Dr. Adams, is the survey going, I don't know if I may have missed this, is the survey still going to go out August 30th? Or are we moving that date as well?
I would recommend just keeping the survey dates that we have in the calendar. It'll just mean beginning to publicize that a little earlier. It would be up roughly the same amount of time.
Okay. Does the survey, the results of the survey go through the portal in a way we see it, or do we wait for you to collect and aggregate everything?
We'll collect and aggregate everything.
And we don't see them at all as they're coming in?
No.
As a data research person, it's like, I always want to get my hands on it. I always want to see it.
We can share some of that as we go along, but it's actually it's a research-based document. That's why we don't make changes to the document itself. Well, we do, but we charge a significant figure to do that. It is research-based. It's really interesting when you see the results. And what we like to do is have you look at that versus each of the focus groups, the interviews, and then what really becomes important, we don't identify you as individual, the 5 of you. We identify, I do one report that reflects our interviews with all of you. So all your views are presented. But then it allows you to look at, this is where the board is as a body, even though there are individual comments. This is where your focus groups were. This is what your survey says. This is what our other individual said. Okay. The next area is the number of candidates that you want to see as a slate. We did have some questions early on, and we get questions all the time. Do we get to go through all the applications? And while we'll prepare the slate, we do provide access during that part of the process to all of the applications. So you will have an opportunity to see those. That's why we ask for a big block of time when we do that, because we don't like to leave those out there. Now, we understand in Florida they're out there anyway, but people that aren't going to be considered, why should they be exposed? And confidentiality becomes very important when it comes to candidates. But as I said out front, on our application, it says, in Florida, it will be and can be public information when you press the button and actually submit. Ohio is similar, but in Ohio you actually have to FERPA it and ask for it. Where here it's pretty much out there. Okay. So the number of candidates, We like to present anywhere from, in that initial slate, anywhere from 5 to 8. It's your call. Sometimes boards want more, sometimes boards want less. We ask you to do, with that group, a paper screen, as well as then taking a look at the other applicants that came in. And once you complete the paper screen, we'll either ask you to do one of two processes that I previously described, and that is use the Delphi technique where you would all do your independent reviews, you do your comparisons, we collect them up, do a master matrix for you, and then you would begin your discussion as to who you want to interview at the next level. That next level group really becomes your initial potential semi-finalist. We suggest, and here I've given, because most of you can be available days. A lot of districts, we have to do this on an all-day Saturday because of schedules, but many of your meetings are during the day, and as long as we lock those dates in when we look at the calendar, you would probably spend an entire day interviewing whatever that number is. We suggest that more than chunking it out and doing it on either successive days or often successive nights. Fatigue tends to set in, and every candidate doesn't always get the same fair approach. As we talked about before, as some of you did with us, as well as you, the first thing we do is Google the candidates, which is very important. We need to know anything out front. And sometimes you'll see an applicant, and you'll say, well, Bill, why didn't you or Dr. Brown submit that candidate? And we'll say, well, we Googled them out front. But you may say, well, did you find out more about it? And sometimes you'll want to add that candidate, and that's fine. Once you do that first round, you'll narrow for the second round probably anywhere from 3 to 4, and then you'll narrow it even further.
In the process where we are narrowing down, as I understand it, you'll be doing the vetting of the candidates. So we will not be calling candidates at that point, right? And I just want to get clear so that everybody is on the same page about at what point we would want to contact candidates or not.
Generally, what happens is that the search team, predominantly Dr. Brown and myself, but there are others involved, will do the background checks. The due diligence, we recommend that third party. That's why, as compressed as this calendar is, after you select a conditional finalist, we ask for 7 to 10 days to complete the investigative report on that individual through a third party.
Who is that third party?
Baker Eubanks is who we suggest using and have a contract with them, but if you choose someone else, that's up to the board.
And this third party is doing background checks?
The third party on the final candidate will do a due diligence report, which will include a financial review of their financial condition, criminal review, civil review, a review of their credentials. And what most electronic and most of them do not cover are the credentials. So both the issuing, if it's a university, we know there's some paper universities that that issue degrees and so forth. They'll check the universities or the college, whether they had the right to issue what they issued, and they'll check the credential the individual actually has. That's important. Now, it's interesting for superintendent in Florida. Technically, there is no certification, technically. There is for every other position, and that's because it's constitutional. For instance, in Martin County now, you're probably going to change from elected to appointed, and that changes the character a little bit. So a couple of questions actually out there at the same time. The due diligence, we recommend only on the final or final two candidates. If you get down to where there's two that you're really having difficulty, we say it's worth the investment of the due diligence. The other part of the comprehensive piece is a 5-year media review, which they'll provide up to 30 different articles on the individual, and also a social media review of things they put out on social media, which today becomes very, very important.
When will we get the list of references that we can call?
Once you identify a finalist, that second round of interviews, you'll have it. You'll have the information ahead of that. Now, we will have contacted those people. There's nothing that precludes board members from also contacting them.
Okay, so just to be clear,
We can call them anytime. I'm sorry.
The references, yes.
References.
and just to be clear, we won't do that with any candidate until there is the final slate of 5, 6, 7, whatever we agree to.
We recommend getting down to after your first round of interviews.
So prior to who we decide, so prior to the 5 to 8 candidates on whom we would do initial interviews, we would not be doing any other searches on the candidates, we might Google search if there's someone we're interested in, but we wouldn't do anything beyond that. Then when there's 5 to 8, whatever is that initial bunch, then we would reach out and do more intensive. We might talk to that person, or we might talk to those references only at that point.
You certainly could reach out to references at that point. We generally recommend when you get to finalists, if you identify 2 or 3 or possibly even 4, you'll probably, and you can never tell. If you have a strong field, it becomes more and more difficult. And so you might be reaching out to more, or there may only be 2. And at that point, that may be where you want to do some due diligence on your own, and that's fine.
Yeah, I think I just want to get clear, because when we did our interim search, I think we had different interpretations of who and at what point in the process it was appropriate to reach out to potential candidates. And I want to make sure in this round that we're really on the same page about that.
I like that, thank you.
Yeah, I want to make sure that we all agree that before a certain point, that we will not be reaching out to potential candidates. After a certain point, it may be appropriate for any of us to reach out at any time with questions we may have for that individual.
Generally, that's with finalists.
So it would not be appropriate for a board member to reach out to a candidate on the 5 to 8 list before we've had a chance to interview them?
No.
Okay.
No, because at that point, you may decide after the interview, and now if you've reached out, for instance, they're a seated superintendent, and you've decided, I want to speak to their board president, I want to speak to, well, you're putting that person unnecessarily in jeopardy if you're not going to consider them.
What about calling that person directly? Would that be appropriate? That was the question.
The candidate?
Right, before the board as a group has been able to interview.
You can, as individuals, but again,
I don't want to, just for the record. I'm just
you
curious.
make your decisions collectively. We recommend you wait till you get to finalist, and then that's going to be the person you're maybe going to be working with for the next 5 to 10 years. And yes,
5 to 10 years, fingers crossed.
So could you make sure that the candidates know not to individually reach out to board members?
oh yes,
Thank you, I appreciate
And
that,
board-
because
and
that
we'll have
did
an agreement
happen.
that board members won't reach out individually to candidates until we are down to that final slate.
finalist.
I agree.
Say that again, Dr. Schiff?
Board members will not reach out to candidates until we are down to that final slate of what may be, whatever we agree, 5 to 8 finalists.
No, you're down to the 3 to 4.
Down to
You're
the 3
You're down
finalists.
to your finalist.
Down to our 3 finalists. So we will not be calling candidates. So we will be looking at their information on paper. We will Google search them. We will interact with our search firm, but we will not have direct interaction with candidates until we are down to our finalists.
From now until the time that we are down to our finalists?
Yeah.
Correct.
I pinky promise.
Okay, but from within that time frame, I also heard that we can call references at any time. So I'm a
Once-
bit confused as to,
Again, we would recommend when you get to finalist.
so call our finalists, call references.
If you desire as individuals, we will have checked the references. But as board members, if you decide you want to call references, when you get to finalist, there's not a problem with that.
I find that to be, I understand that we hired you to do that for us, but I have hired people before. I have been through that process. I think it's very important that we, who are hiring a superintendent, should be able to call references as well. Waiting until our final candidate, why would we want to call a reference when we're down to our final candidate? Our final candidate, we're probably going to hire
We're
them.
saying our,
You said finalist.
3 to 4.
Final 3 to 4 is
Well,
what we're
I
saying.
find that we should be able to call references to narrow it down to our final 3 or 4.
Totally disagree. They're going to be doing the reference checks.
Doesn't mean that they're going to answer the questions that I would answer.
What-
Ask.
But we didn't
doesn't-
hire you to do the search. We hired Hazard Young and Tia and Associates to do the search.
Yeah, I still find that board members should not be hands-off.
Oh,
It
and-
it is prudent of us to be as involved instead of hands-off, as involved as possible.
And my position would be, it is counterproductive for you to be involved at that time to the search firm. It is counterproductive for board members to be involved in the semifinalist reference checking.
But that's not what was mentioned before. It was mentioned before, we can call references anytime. So I'm a little still,
when we're.
'Cause we're going
when
back
we're
and
down to
forth.
that
Final
final
slate. I think this was a miscommunication.
I heard the bell, maybe.
Yeah, and I heard you saying you would call references when you are down to the final slate of 3 or 4 candidates. Is that right?
In answer to the question as to whether board members should be involved, at least from our recommendation, we indicate that until finalists are identified, we suggest you allow us to do our job. You're the board, you make that decision, but that's what our recommendation is, that's what our past experience is. Remember, the candidates are also interviewing you. And you sometimes could convey the wrong impression if you get involved in the process at the wrong time.
Hold on one second. Mrs. Barrenborg, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, I think the reason why we should not get involved into the very end is because some of these people apply, and I guess for Mrs. Rosario's sake, some of these people apply and haven't really notified their boards or whatever until maybe they're a finalist. And I think we should allow them to be able to go as far as that point, and so we pick who the finalists are, and then they're all in. And then I think it's fair for us to call whoever we want. But I think until we get to the finalist stages, I think we're also protecting the individuals that are applying as well. Does that answer your point, Mrs. Rosario?
Well, here's my opinion on this. We get to the final, we get through all the applicants, we decide there's 7 that we want to interview. Before we finalize it to those 3, I think we should be able to call, if we have to narrow it down to those 3, that is the point that we should be able to call the references.
I agree.
Because if we're having to narrow it, I don't want to get to the 3 and realize that 2 of them didn't have great references.
But if we get to that point, we can always go back and say we'd like to open up to some of the other candidates that we were considering at that time. I think Mrs. Barrenborg's point is fair.
But if they come here and we interview them, the 7 candidates, it's out there.
I understand. Can you
Well, then
imagine?
they're a finalist.
Yeah,
can you
they are a
imagine-
finalist at that point.
Can you imagine
Yeah, no,
having
they're-
5 board members calling all of the it is crazy town. I mean, I have worked with recruiting firms before, I've worked in a recruiting firm, with a firm before. I've seen companies or HR professionals get involved or leaders get involved at the wrong time, and it is counterproductive to the reason we have hired the search firm to do the job.
We all called references on our final 3.
Yeah, on our final 3, but I mean, can you explain what you do when you do
But we
the
were in a
reference check?
rushed process at that point.
With our reference check, you'll see on the application where we require at least 4 references. Generally, it'll go from anywhere from 4 to 7, sometimes more. We reach out to those people. We have a series of roughly 17 questions we ask. The last question is, who else might be able to tell us something about the individual that we don't already know, or that may even be a different perspective than yours? We try to get a name, and we follow up with secondary references. So that's the reference part of it for the background in terms of work and work performance.
Do you supply that for the 7 candidates? Will we see your reference checks on those 7?
We can. We generally do not, because we try to keep our notes separate, because otherwise, if we share them with you, then they're all public information. And we have to then tell the person we call, if we're calling somebody on a reference and it's Florida, and we're going to be providing you with a copy of what was said, then we have to tell them it will be public information, and it can be FERPA'd. So.
Okay, so my opinion is, if they are a finalist, if they're not in the final last set of interviews, if they are in the second,
Preliminary.
right,
Semifinalist. we could-
right, that if they come in and they're willing to interview with this board before I make my final 3 decision, I want to be able to check references. Not saying that I'm going to call them every single reference on there, but I want to have that
Option.
option.
That is fine, except it also then presents a problem with the calendar, because we ask you to make decisions after each of the
Let's-
interview
you know what?
processes.
We're not making decisions on a calendar. We're making decisions on long-term, this person hopefully is here for the next 8, 10, 12 years. So to do our due diligence, taking an extra week or so, or extra couple of days, I am not rushing this to that point. I'm not doing it. I do not want to be rushed by a calendar. Yes, we have a goal of trying to hit January, but we have to make the right decision, and I'm not going to be rushed.
I agree.
And I would say that the January deadline is somewhat artificial. Our goal is January, February, but we're not under the gun. We're not losing Dr. Moxley at that point. Dr. Moxley is flexible to a point. Our goal is to have it done as soon as possible in January, but if it's another week, we're not going to be without a superintendent, as I understand it. So I agree with you, Laura, in this.
Yep. I agree too.
Yeah, I'm less concerned with calendar than I am with the right person. And, sorry, Dr. Moxley, that, because I know that has implications for you, too.
It does.
But,
You want to do what is right for the district, understandably. I also know that the getting the person in the seat, the right person in the seat to do the work of the district in the timing of the district is a little different this year than it is in other years because of when the session starts, what we're trying to do in some of the work products of getting systems in place. Like I said, that January time period feels and seems right for the system.
And I think we have to be
That's just
mindful.
my opinion.
And, well, but your opinion's very valid. I mean, this is you've served as a superintendent for 9 years. If you're sitting here telling us that it will behoove the district to have someone in place by January in order to be able to continue on this process, or in January, then, I mean, that's an important perspective.
Does a week matter? No, I mean, to give you a week to do that, that's not gonna hinder anything. But if you're talking about, okay, we're gonna wait till the end of February or March.
That's not what we're
that would-
saying.
Yeah, no, that's what I said.
heard
just
Ms.
wanna be
yeah, Dr.
clarify
Adams
what I-
say, we want somebody seated by January 1st. You
We
said
never said
sometime in
that.
January. We don't want to go as far as February, but if there were, if there were a glitch, we're not under pressure to not have a superintendent. We have agreed that our goal is, as I heard it, sometime in January,
Yes.
ideally before February. If we went into the first week of February, it's not catastrophic, but we are aiming for sooner, but not necessarily somebody seated by January 1st.
So I understand, I hear both sides of this. I'm gonna say, I'm comfortable with saying January, but it should not go into February. I think that the goal has to be that by the end of January, we have someone that is starting in the district, because I don't want to go into February and then we're 1 week into February. I mean, we need to set the timeline up and it needs to be aggressive.
Well, we also have to keep into consideration that the candidate may not be able to start
That's a
January
whole
31st.
nother, I mean, that's a hypothetical that we can't
So,
even plan for right now.
To goal for the end of January is good, but if we are hiring somebody coming in and the person says, I can't start until February 2nd, then that's
Okay,
not,
well,
that shouldn't
obviously
make
then-
or break our
No, but-
decisions.
Oh, I was gonna say, no, we shouldn't hire them if they can't start until February 2nd.
Well,
But
I'm
the-
sure you would.
Yeah, right.
What I heard you saying, and on the calendar, it suggests January 1st, and I just want to make clear that what we said was January, and that could be January 1st, it could be January 20th. I think we're a little bit overreacting here.
Yeah.
I think as far as the calendar, the whole point was really at what point in the process the board gets involved in doing reference checks. And again, our recommendation is with finalists. And part of that is because of how we try to get you to go through the decision-making process. That's really irrelevant of calendar. Normally, after the round of interviews, the board makes a decision as to who's coming back for the next round. And then when you get to that final round, there would be time to do reference checks before you interview potential finalists. What I'm still a little confused on, I'm hearing that you want to do reference checks on semifinalists before they're interviewed.
No.
Not me.
No. What I think I'm hearing is that once we've interviewed the semifinalists, before we select the finalists, we want to do the reference checks after we've interviewed the semifinalists
Before you determine who you're bringing back,
for the final.
So that will delay that a week.
that'll delay it another week.
That's,
Okay.
I think, what they're saying,
All right.
is that, yeah.
And we're saying we want the option, not that every board member is going to do it, but we want the option. If there are concerns, if there are, somebody that a board member wants to speak to, that's what I understood.
Yeah, and
Laura.
we'll have situations where, for instance, in a recent search, the board member in one state knew a board member from a national conference in the other state where the individual was coming from, and they called that individual as for a very personal, and that was, part of the process. That happened to be on a finalist.
So, as long as we're talking procedure, what is the procedure? Let's say, for example, there's something on a candidate's resume that we're interested in following up with the candidate, or a candidate interviews and says something that a board member wants to follow up on. How does that work?
Generally, if it's during the interview process, we at first round of interviews at least, ask that each board member obviously asks their questions, and we'll work with you on assisting with that, but they're your questions. We'll provide some suggested ones. But again, you may have your own interest. The only thing we ask is ask the same question during the first round to each candidate. If there's something where you want clarification, rather than try to slip in another question, as long as it's for clarification, to ask for the clarification then. Now, after the meeting, if there's still a question in your mind, you obviously could Google or do whatever follow-up you were going to do.
hypothetically, let's say, because Googling only gets you so far, which we know. Let's say a candidate has, I'll use as an example, a candidate tells me they've got lots of experience in restorative justice, and they've done restorative justice in their district and in X number of schools, and they've had these kinds of results. When I hear that, them telling me that is not sufficient for me to know that they know what they're talking about and what they're doing. And that might be something I would want to follow up on, because that could be something that somebody was telling me. And I do actually know of an instance exactly where this happened in a superintendent search in another state. A person was hired based on their expertise, and I'm using this just because it's something I'm familiar with, was hired based on their ability to sell their expertise in restorative justice. I know that that person's expertise was limited. I would like, if it were me, I would like to have a follow-up conversation about that. What would be the process for that?
At what stage of the?
Well, that's what I'm asking you. Either it's on their resume, let's just say, either it's on their resume and I pick it up there, or it comes out in an interview when I pick it up there, and they say something that's like, oh, wait. And this is an example of just an area I happen to be real familiar with. It could be any area for anyone at any time. But I hear something where they are communicating to me that they are very knowledgeable in a particular area. They say something that to me communicates, ooh, I'm not sure you actually get it. I'd like to follow up on that because I'm not clear from this interview I'm getting the depth of information I need. How would I go about doing that?
Generally, you would alert us to your concern, possibly even put your concern in writing, and then we'd go back to the individual and ask for an explanation and get that explanation to you.
In this particular instance, and I realize I'm being very specific here, in this particular area, this would not necessarily be a make or break issue in this search, but it could be something else that would be in which a board member has expertise. I personally need to hear the candidate's response to that, because while I could tell you what my concerns are, you don't actually have the expertise to gauge the answer. So how do we do that?
Well, if this is not a single issue that's going to make or break as you describe, then in the next round of interviews, you make that a specific question. In the first round of interviews, you try to ask every candidate the same question almost in the same way except for clarification. In the second round of interviews, it's much more a conversation. You'll have a set of things. You may have some presentations you want the candidates to do. And you may have some very specific questions, and that would be the place to ask that.
And if I don't have those questions for all candidates, but only that particular candidate, at that point it would be appropriate for me to ask different questions of each individual candidate.
During the second round of interviews, yes.
And if I heard something, by the time we're at the second round, we're pretty close to making a decision, and we probably in our heads have some sense of who we're leaning towards. Mm-hmm. If I hear if it is not until that moment that I'm able to do the follow-up in this particular area, and the candidate gives me an answer that I find wholly unsatisfactory, at that point we're on the last round of interviews, and I either knock that candidate out based on that answer, or I wish I had known that beforehand because it would have influenced how I might have gone about these interviews. I may be being overly picky here, but I'm using myself as an example. There may be, for example, a finance question that Mrs. Zork would have because she has expertise in that in a way that I don't. I don't know what it is. This is such an important decision.
Well, I think also that goes to the references.
Yeah.
You know,
yes.
If they're going to say they have an expertise in that, one of their references needs to be someone that they've worked with in that. And then you call the reference and you talk to the reference.
And when we do the leadership profile and we identify what we're looking for in a candidate, you're going to flesh out some of these things. So, like, with DSEG order and some of the equity issues we've dealt with. I think we're going to see that's going to be a recurring theme of African-American achievement numbers, and that's going to, we're going to probably look, I'm just throwing this because it's something that we deal with,
That's the next one I'm
right?
going to.
Right, so that's going to be something that I think we're going to see as a concern, not just with board members, but with community stakeholders as well. And that'll be something when they go out and they actively recruit, they'll be looking for someone who has expertise in that area. Or, so, I mean, this is why you work with a search firm who has experience in looking, that's why the leadership profile becomes so important. And I understand you're looking at it from a perspective of someone might be lying or not telling the truth on what
That's not what I'm
they're-
saying.
Or, okay, then maybe you could explain to me what you're saying,
Sure.
because I don't necessarily understand.
I'm not suggesting that somebody's lying. I'm suggesting that somebody's, I can only do this in my area, but somebody may communicate to me that they are very familiar with something, and they're pretty clear they know exactly how to do this particular thing, and they've done it successfully in the past.
Okay.
In their mind, they may believe that they've done that.
Sure.
This particular area, this or equity and DSEG is another one in which I have particular things that I need to hear, that I need to say, or that I would need to see to be clear that what they are considering their level of expertise with this particular issue matches what I consider to be a level of expertise, and that they know that. I'm not sure I want to.
But here's the thing, we don't,
So can I finish talking?
Yeah, of course.
I'm not mistrusting. We hired a search firm because they're really great at what they did. I'm not suggesting that. But we as a board are ultimately responsible for the decision, as has come up.
That's right.
And if somebody presents to me that they are expert on an issue and something raises a yellow flag for me, I want to have the opportunity to follow up on that.
so may I just answer to that? You're looking for the superintendent who may not have direct expertise in restorative justice, but may have been successful in a district because they were able to implement a system of processes and procedures and hire the people in order to be able to execute what they
Awesome,
wanted
then
to do.
I need to hear that. I need to hear that in a way that satisfies my level of comfort.
Wonderful, but do you see what I'm saying? So you're looking for a leader to be able to do that. We're not necessarily looking for someone who's going to be an expert in a specific subject matter.
I get it.
Okay.
I'm using that as an example
I
because it's
understand.
something I'm familiar with. I get the difference between a superintendent level of expertise and the people implementing within the district. I'm using this as an example because it's my area of expertise. You have a different one, you have a different one, you have a different one. I want to get clear on the process so we don't get into the process and then find that something comes up which one of us is not comfortable with because we didn't agree on a process, to go back and make sure that that when we make that final decision, we have every question answered. I of course don't want a red flag. I don't want a yellow flag. I want all systems go on whomever we hire and to be ecstatic and optimistic about that choice. And in order to do that, there's a lot of work that has to go into it, not only by our search firm, but by those of us who are charged with the public responsibility of making that decision.
Well, it's very easy. At the first round of interviews, those things that are most important, we're going to actually spend a session like this developing the questions with you. And if that's something that's important, or if you've seen that on the resumes, you build that into the questions on the first round.
But I think what Dr. Schiff, if I may, Dr. Schiff is suggesting is that oftentimes it's not the question that we are initially creating. It is the follow-up that comes subsequent to the dialogue.
didn't know it was
And
gonna be
so
an issue until-
oftentimes, that's one of the reasons why it's so important for us to be able to have an opportunity to call a candidate, or maybe there's other ways that we can, after an interview is, a formal sit-down interview is done, maybe there is a little informal meet and greet where, I don't know how it could work, but I understand completely what Dr. Schiff is talking about, because you always have that, well, no, you may have just a little bit of clarity that you may have a need for a little bit more clarity in a particular area, that just at the time your 3 minutes was up, you just didn't get the final closure on a particular topic, and you're really needing the candidate to clarify this. That might be the make or break for that candidate in our eyes to be the final candidate, or not. And so this is one of the reasons why when we were given for the interim superintendent, search, we were given an opportunity, a window to call candidates that we thought we might be interested in. There were three particular candidates, and you don't know this, that's why I'm sharing. There were three particular candidates that I particularly were interested in. Dr. Moxley was one of them. In my phone call with them during this time period, it was not an interview. All of them knew it was not an interview. It was just a chat, just to kind of get to know the person and find out whatever we can find out that's not written on a resume. That kind of thing is not what we are going to do for this process for a superintendent. But as follow-up, I think we really need to think about having the option or including somewhere in this process the ability for us to be able to follow up. And maybe it's about extending some interview time. Maybe that's really all it needs to be. Maybe we need to not be so strict with the 3-minute timer and allow for some follow-up. Maybe I think that's what we need to do, because we may not need it, but what if we do?
Yeah, there are a lot of ways in the interview process to address those things that you're saying. We do not recommend individual board members reaching out to candidates until they become finalists. There's a lot that you can do in between. First of all, we don't recommend the use of a timer other than a time block. And normally in that first round, we'll say to the candidate, the first question we're going to tell you, and that is come in. The board's going to ask you to tell something about your leadership style, who you are as a person, and about your integrity that they don't already know from all of the information they have on you. Take 3 to 5 minutes to do that. Then you go through your multiple questions you as a board would ask. Then generally there would be a time for them to ask you questions, and then generally from that there may be some follow-up questions if there's time that the board would ask. We let them know, do the math. If the board says an hour and a half and you have 5-minute opening, you get a close. You have 5 board members that are each going to ask 3 questions. If you take 3 minutes approximately for each response, this is how much time you have. If you don't listen to the instructions, which tells you something about the individual as well, and they only get through, and the board only gets to ask 2 questions each, and you would plan to ask 3, that also tells you something about the individual. If you invite them back, it's a different story. Often we'll have, for instance, if there's an achievement gap with a specific minority group, you may provide or give the candidates, or we would, based on your direction, access to studies that have been done and ask them to come in and do a half-hour presentation on how they would address that achievement gap. And then you take 20 minutes to question them on that. This is second round. You might then also talk about, well, you've got, what, $46 million in facilities. So there may be a question about that. There may be a 15-minute presentation, PowerPoint, whatever. And then you ask questions. And then you go into questions. And often at that second round, and this I think might get to the question, in the first round you answered the question and you said this, elaborate on it. Or I've done some further research and you said you had, there was a significant improvement or you closed the achievement gap. Well, how many students were involved in that? What were the specifics? What did it run from? And I've seen people put on their resumes, we've done this and we've used this intervention and our students went from here to here. And then you find out there were 25 students in a district of 25,000 students that were affected by that. So there are ways to do that without driving off candidates, and especially in a state like Florida where everything then becomes public. And then a candidate, and that's why we recommend when you get down to the finalists, it's all, before you make a decision, you have time to do that. And if it affects our calendar, typically we see boards make decisions right after the process. If you need a few days, you take a few days. We just build it in.
Yeah, I think I just want to say something quickly. You know, you asked some questions about when we could contact, when we couldn't contact. I will be, and it's kind of the elephant in the room, but I will be open and say, when we went through the interim process, I was not comfortable with individual board members calling up candidates on this pool for a chat before we got to, well, that wasn't my understanding. It felt unprofessional. It concerned me that perhaps it would drive away candidates. It didn't feel professional to me. We are searching for a leader of a $300 million enterprise. I just think it needs to be done in a consistent and professional manner. I don't think they're going to expect they're going to get a phone call at 7 o'clock, you know, whenever. I think we need to be very as professional and as consistent as possible with every single candidate. And if I'm the only one who is uncomfortable, well, then so be it. I will voice that. I was uncomfortable with it.
Well, I prefer to call references. That's my preference, so.
Question, on the second round of interviews that we've narrowed down to, let's say, 3 candidates, how long are those interviews typically?
Anywhere from 2 to 3 hours each. And again, it depends on the process. When we did the commissioner search in Rhode Island, it was 2 candidates. It was 4 hours. One hour with the governor with one of the candidates. The Board of Regents, which was the State Board of Ed in Rhode Island, interviewed for 2 hours, and then the candidate for commissioner interviewed the board for 1 hour. And then they flipped and did the afternoon the other way.
I like that. I like a longer interview and allowing the candidate to also interview the board.
But you narrow the field before you do that.
Sure, of course.
And then once you do that, you take whatever time you need. There's the informal discussions sometimes work. Sometimes a dinner. Now you have to be careful because if 5 of you, well, if 3 of you take out a board member or a superintendent, and let's say a superintendent and spouse or significant other or whatever, you know, over an informal way of doing it. In Collier, at the end of the process, and they're a 5-person board as well. In Collier, each of the board members had a 1 hour with the candidate. And this gets away from this calling and this behind the 1 hour, and because you all have constituent groups, each of the board members got to invite in people they wanted from their constituent.
Oh, I love it.
And they did a 1 hour, and they rotated between the 2 final candidates.
Oh, that's
I
kind of
like
awesome.
that.
And you can talk about those things when you get to that part of the process. It's not to keep things away from the board. You do need to keep it as professional as possible, and you want everything to be transparent. And when you start having individual conversations, candidates start to think, is this a board that when the board makes a decision, it's a board decision, which you do statutorily, or is this, I'm going to be working for 5 different boards? So you consider all of that as part of the process. That doesn't mean you don't get your opportunity or you don't do what you need to do, because you have to be comfortable in the end. And yes, it is probably the most important decision you make. You make a lot of important decisions, but it's a very important one.
When did Collier, you said Collier was the one who did the 1 hour with the board and they were able to invite their constituent in with them? And
Collier
that
did
1
it
hour?
after they selected 2 finalists.
So this was at the very end
The
of
end of the process, yes. They did it, and they did a lot of things. They had to deal with some issues with the previous superintendent. So transparency was huge. Personal dynamics with the community and individuals was huge. I mean, the district had, at the time, 50 of the 56 schools were rated Florida A. There was I don't recall offhand, this was 7 years ago, but a budget just under $1 billion. And they had a surplus of 162 million. Not an unappropriated balance, let me use the right term. And yet that superintendent was let go. And so there needed to be, in this case, building of trust and respect back in the community. And so they did a lot of things at the end of the process. They did a meet and greet with the community, with the two finalists.
Well, I would like to, the last time something, when the district went through the search, they did have the community and their last three finalists, the last three finalists, the community came out and each candidate was asked questions by the community members. It was more like a open town hall.
That didn't work out so well, so maybe we should.
Well, no, the recommendations didn't go with what the community had said at the time, but maybe they should have listened to them. But that shows you how that candidate can interact with the community, too.
Yeah, and we've done them, and we did it in Collier. Here's how it happened in Collier. Lois Tomey, the anchor for Wink News in Fort Myers, was the moderator. Now, we took the questions online and 3x5 cards prior to, there were 182 questions, and each candidate was up for a half hour. So we vetted the questions, tried to lump them together, and Lois asked the same questions individually. One candidate sequestered while the other's up, and so on. And they were, again, they were told, you're going to get approximately 10 questions. You have a half hour. You get an opening, you get a close, and use your time wisely. Broward did something in a mall where it was simpler, and I moderated that. And generally, we'll do that. When you get to that point, if you decide you want to,
Yeah.
you want to do that.
So I think there's a lot that we can do at that point. We need to get through the rest of these, and then, as time goes, we can really finalize all the details.
You can make decisions as you get closer to that point as to how you want to do that. Internal candidate, are we good with us bringing to you somewhere between 5 and 8 as a slate? And internal candidates, we recommend if there are any internal or local, you treat them the same as all other candidates. No difference if the candidate's worthy of recommending for a slate, they're worthy. If they're not, we don't recommend courtesy interviews, but that's up to you.
Okay.
Candidate expenses. Do you have a policy, or is there a process for covering candidate travel expenses for interviews? Generally, with a national search, expenses are covered, and we have a guideline. We follow IRS guidelines. We follow GAO. Whatever the GAO says for Government Accounting Office says for your area, if a hotel is required, that they stay all within those guidelines.
I'm personally comfortable handling, reimbursing for travel expenses. I think that it's fair if you're asking them to come for an interview. It's fair.
They're asking for the job, though.
Well,
I don't know.
I think it's fair.
If I'm invited to interview for a position, the presumption is that those inviting me for the interview will pay my expenses. That's just been my history.
Yes.
Is that the 5 to 8 or just the final 3, or is it all?
Generally, the slate that you bring in. Now, if we find it often, if they're in state or they're traveling a couple hundred miles, they probably generally don't even submit. It's the people you bring in from some other jurisdiction. And as I said at the presentation, sometimes what happens, you may have had a great candidate from the southeastern part of the United States, Florida in particular, that may have taken a job in California and been very successful, but they understand what California is and what Florida is, and they want to come back and be on the East Coast, meaning the East Coast of the United States, as well as perhaps the East Coast of Florida in this case. And so do you pick up that expense if there's somebody you believe is worthy of bringing in? And you're going to determine whether you want to bring them in based on a review of their credentials.
You're talking about round-trip airfare, a rental car, and one night of hotel, if, at most
If,
two,
if required.
if required.
Yeah.
Times how many
Okay,
candidates?
so
5 to 8.
the money miser in me is saying if the first 5 to 8, we pay half, you pay half, and then the final 3 that come back, we pay all.
I think we're nickeling and diming at that point. If it's a candidate that we feel is worthy of an interview at that point, I think we extend them the courtesy of reimbursing their travel, and we ask them to come and to give their best at that interview, and
We can also, we could put a cap on travel.
I was just going to say
There's a
that.
cap.
Is that, there's a cap?
Yeah.
Well, no, the IRS
you-
guidelines is different than a cap.
No,
It's different.
I was thinking that we offer a stipend for the first round, a travel stipend of, I don't know,
500?
$300 to $500. And if anything over that, they have to pay out of their pocket for the first round, and the last candidates, we pay in full.
I just think
Not
you just pay their travel. I mean, we're not talking about a lot of money here.
I just look at the fact when we were looking at our CFO, how many we had narrowed it down to one was out of state, and when we offered them to come down, at the end of the day, when we offered them the job, they didn't take it because they didn't, they weren't ready to take the job. I think if they have some skin in it, they're gonna be a little bit more serious about it.
I'm not sure I agree with you on
Dr.
that.
Adams, can you speak to your experience regarding reimbursement for travel and candidates' perspectives?
Generally, the candidates are reimbursed. You can set top stops beyond government accounting office, beyond, and they're the guidelines we simply give. We have to follow them. We follow GAO and IRS for mileage. You can set a top stop of $1,000, $1,200 on the first round, and then, and again, they have to submit receipts. We use a software called Certify, and they have to. Even if you put down mileage, Certify calculates the mileage. We always say economy, and some of the. And no extras, not buying your seat except on some of the low-cost airlines. You have to buy a seat or you don't get a seat, but that's, within reason, you want to get the best possible candidates. You don't want to break the bank. You want to be prudent with obviously public monies.
And I think if we put a cap, there could be an in-state cap and an out-of-state cap, because those airfares are going to be different.
Not always.
They have to submit
Not
receipts. I
always.
mean, it's not like,
My cap's 500 for the first round. I'm putting my opinion out there, and 100% the second.
I could do that.
I feel a little differently. If we hadn't, in the scenario that Dr. Adams described, where there is a candidate who's moved out to California, wants to come back to Florida, they're an outstanding candidate, $500 will not even get them a plane ticket. And I don't know that I want to rule that person out. I'm not saying I want that person, but if
We're talking
it would
about
raise an
8
eyebrow for me as a candidate for that position.
you're talking about them moving their whole family, or, moving
Yeah,
their
it would
lights
raise
and-
an eyebrow that I was coming into a district that was unwilling to buy me a plane ticket. It might say I'm not so interested in that job. I could be wrong. I've never applied for a superintendent job. I will never apply for a superintendent job.
Oh, amen.
But yeah, there is, we have allocated a certain amount of money for the search. I think it's appropriate to treat people with a certain degree of respect about the process. So, and that, again, obviously, my opinion. But if I were a candidate who was being nickeled and dimed over this, it would give me pause about the district.
Well, they need to, I don't know.
Now, that doesn't mean that I'm going to spend $5,000, it means within limits. Of course,
Right.
there are limits. But $500 from many states in this country will not buy a plane ticket if they have to get it at any, inside 2 weeks, if they have to get in any amount of time that doesn't
Because we're
allow a
also
lot of
setting a
planning.
time- yeah, we're
We're
also
setting a
setting a time
timeline,
frame.
we may be asking them to do that twice. The tickets are gonna be more expensive if they're coming in short notice. I have, as somebody who does a fair amount of travel, that may or may not get you a plane ticket.
Okay. Go ahead, Terry, or Mrs.
Thank
Rambourg.
you. I don't speak much, but when I do, I really appreciate the bell. I don't want to nickel and dime this person. I think we need to be professional, but also understand that some people's understanding of flights across the country mean I need to be first class. I think that, like you said, within reason, I think we need to say, we're willing to buy you an economy plane ticket and put you in a nice hotel and put you up or whatever. But we don't have to nickel and dime it. We just have to give it maybe a cost. I don't think 500 is reasonable. I think 1,000, 1,500 is reasonable for out of state. And then they spend it the way they can to get here. And then we know that we've at least budgeted that amount for those people to come and interview. I just think that we're nickel and diming this too much.
And I don't think any candidate is going to presume business or first class. We can clearly state we pay for a coach ticket on a reasonable airline. Again,
They're not going to come in
I don't-
taking advantage.
Yeah,
If they want the
I
job.
really don't
they're-
think so.
We hope not.
It's a lot of work to interview for a position you don't want at this level. I would be surprised if anybody would do
Mrs.
that.
Zork, I hear consensus for 3 to cover travel reimbursement within reason. Can we,
What, we have to define within reason.
okay, I think,
If you want to come up to $1,000, we can do 1,000.
I don't want to go
Cap.
over 1,000.
I say 1,500 for out of
800.
state. I say 1,500 as a cap for out of state. You figure, if we say California, they have to book within 2 weeks, they have to fly into the local airport, they have to spend the night at a hotel, they have to rent a car. I just think, I don't think you're going to have anyone spending 1,500, but I mean, again, I don't want to nickel and dime it. And I don't say this lightly, I'm a taxpayer. My husband and I, our family pays a lot of taxes. But I think we want to try to do this in the most professional way possible.
What's our budget on travel?
I was just going to tell you, I'm doing some quick math in my head. We put in $50,000, that's to pay the Hazard and Young there. So just hypothetical, if you bring in a slate of 8 people and all of them came from wherever and you did 8,000, that's $8,000.
So do
And with that, I'm just put it in
Yeah,
context.
and that's not even taking into consideration our advertising. That's not taking
You need
into
to pay your
consideration
advertising
this,
and any reception
Due
or whatever.
diligence.
it's not doing the due diligence, the third party, which can be pretty pricey on its own.
All
That's
right,
So 1,000.
1,000. Let's do 1,000.
Okay.
We're talking about high-level professionals. Hopefully, if it's 1,200, they
I'm-
have the 200.
I would even do 800 for the first round and then pay in
Let's
full for the
just-
second,
Let-
for the final, sorry.
Let's just do 1,000.
Can we say 1,000 with the possibility that if you can justify, if somebody's got to get,
Just do 1,000, Mark. Just
So
say
here's some of the things you can do, is like, here, if we are bringing in, let's say 8 people, the first round, and we want to use X hotel, we can
We
contact
negotiate a deal.
that hotel,
Exactly.
do a group rate, we
Yep.
pay for that.
Yep.
We pay for that, that's not part of their expense. They go in, it's already prepaid,
Yep.
we do that, we get try and get a government rate, whatever, do that. Most
One night?
places, that's how you can
That's how they do
economize
it.
that.
Yep.
Then the person is only looking at, okay, I had to get a rental car, I had to get a plane ticket, and then their mileage.
and their food.
Yeah.
They'll be IRS reimbursed for their meals per diem.
They're not going to put in for meals and stuff, though. I mean, they're not. You're talking hotel, plane, and rental car.
Okay, 1,000. I hear consensus.
Cap. First round? I mean, the.
Semifinals.
The semifinals.
Mhm.
And what about the last?
I'm
The
okay with
finalists.
100% second.
100%?
The final,
Finalists, 100%.
as long as it's reasonable, no, like we said.
On all of them, we tell them they have to follow GAO. It's very
Okay.
tight.
Yeah.
And we know what the IRS rate is, so.
Okay,
All right, the next, thank you. The next item is the advertising, and you do in the one folder in the appendix have the advertising cost. It's also on the portal, and there are basically three potential packages that we offer. You don't have to go with those. I had suggested at the presentation meeting that you look at package 3 because it gives you some individual advertisements, hard copy in Education Week, which is one of the premier areas that you want to be. It also, that particular one gives you the dedicated, plus it keeps you in our group ad throughout the length of the search. We think that's important. You're also up online, and then AASA has you up for 30 days. So there are three packages. Package 1 only gets you on our group ad one time, and for a district this size, I would not recommend that. Package 2 is an alternative. Package 3, and again, we just do this as a service. This is is probably the most comprehensive. The other that I would suggest you consider, in addition to one of those packages, is the ALIS NASB package, and have us also promote the search with the Association of Latino School Administrators and the National Alliance of Black Educators.
How much, is that additional?
520,
520?
it's on the, yeah.
Oh, that's down below.
Okay, for sure, can we have
You have it up.
consensus? We
Can you
definitely
see it?
want that. Huh?
Do you have it up, or can you?
My computer is not working.
You can look at mine if you want. I've got it.
See if I can.
I think you need to do that one.
Okay, can we get consensus right now? This is easy to get out of the way for the Association of Latino Administrators. Okay, that's 520.
Can we add the 500, the 520 to any of those packages?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
Yes, correct.
A la carte here. Okay.
So we talking about doing
Ordering
both
from a
of those,
Chinese
or just this one?
Why do you recommend package 3, Dr. Adams?
It gives you an in-print ad in Ed Week, and to legitimize a national search, you almost have to do that. You can do it independently, but it costs you about $3,500 if you, as a board, want to put it in one time, about an inch and a half in size. We get a discount.
When is that published? When is that published?
It's published 39 times a year, every other week.
Every other
It's
week?
not published as much in the summer. Once you get now into August, the end of August, beginning of September, it comes out every other week.
So when are we looking at trying to get that in? If we did that?
We would, the in-print one, we suggest waiting until you have your September 24th. If you wanted us to come up and work with, we could put together an ad that simply didn't include the leadership profile. We like to be as targeted as possible, so September 24th would be ideal.
And that would come out, does it come out, how long does it take for the publication to come out?
It comes out every other week. So
Okay,
it generally is out by Wednesdays.
And don't they put it online immediately?
It's immediately online for, and it stays online, but for minimum 30 days.
Okay.
In the past, where have most of your candidates come from?
Roughly half to 60% will come from advertising. The 40% will come from direct recruitment. Our associates will reach out across the country once the leadership profile goes up.
And from the advertising, do you have a sense of, it comes from Ed Week, it comes from online, it comes from print, it comes from, is there a sense of that?
Well, Ed Week is the absolute best source, and online is helpful, but seeing it in print, it's the first when people open the Ed Week, they go to it's on the back 2 pages, and that's where they go. They open it. When we say our group ad lists our active searches that have picked package 3. Otherwise, it only goes in one time. If it's package 1, if it's package 2, it goes in twice in our group. It goes in every time we advertise throughout until you select somebody. So even if we get to the end, and I don't want to really bring this up, we get to the end and you don't like any of the candidates and we go back out, it stays in throughout the search.
But the online listing, the HYA group ad, is that, it says here it goes in HYA group ads, and then it says an online listing in the top schools job. Those are independent ads, right?
Yes.
Those are 2 separate things.
Yes.
And the top schools jobs stays online in Ed Week for 30 days. And on package 2, showcased on the homepage for Ed Week for 7 days. Package 3, showcased also for 7 days. So the online stuff is the same. It's online listed top schools job for 30 days, showcased on Ed Week and top schools for 7 days. That's the
The
same.
big difference between 2 and 3 is the in-print ad. When we say our group ad, it will say, School District of Indian River County, Superintendent search. And then it will drive you to our website versus getting the in-print ad in.
We had Mrs. Justice, then Mrs. Rosario.
Dr. Adams, you said it legitimizes a national search. We are conducting a national search. We've chosen to work with a national firm so that we can do a national search. As a professional, if your recommendation is, as a professional recruiting agency, that that the best way to do the most successful national search is to go with package 3 with the add-on, then I say we do that. That is my opinion on this.
That is our recommendation.
experts.
As I said, from an HYA standpoint, all this does is help with recruitment. It's not a cost. This is done with us as a.
Right, because to be fair, what I'm going to say to you is, at the end of this, you're not going to be able to, if we don't like the candidate pool, you can't come back and say, well, we didn't do the full advertising. Perhaps if we had done the full advertising. I'm not saying that you're going to say that, but if we want the largest candidate pool and we're asking them to do a job and the experts telling us this is what they need to do in order to do their job properly, it was my opinion that we give you all of the tools at your disposal.
Okay. Go ahead.
30 days doesn't seem long at all. 30 days is a blink of an eye.
Never blinked that long.
We're probably going to be recruiting for just about 45 days max. So it's going to cover, it will cover whatever package you take, it will cover the period of time that we're up. Plus, we'll be up on our website, we'll be up on your website, we'll be doing LinkedIn. There are other sources, but these are the ones that there's a cost involved with.
What are the other sources? You said LinkedIn.
Well, as I said, you'll be up on our website.
Unlimited time, or until the
As soon as
position
we
is
have
filled, or how long will we be on your website?
Until the position's filled.
Okay.
We
And how long will we be on LinkedIn?
until the position's filled.
Okay. Any others? What other websites that are not here in this package listed?
It would be on our website, would it?
It'll be on your website as well, yeah.
One thing I do like about this is, here I am, the money miser, but I feel like the package 3 is really the best bang for the buck, because here it's saying publication for the length of the search. It's not saying 30 days. So if it was to take 45 to 60 days, God, hope it doesn't happen. What I'm understanding is one publication is $3,500 in this magazine.
Correct.
So one publication, it's already paying for itself, even if they have to run it two or three times.
I just did a very quick calculation on what we're paying HYA, approximate travel costs, package 3, plus the add-on. And we're still about $8,000 under our allocated budget for the search. So I think we come in okay.
We do, but we still have to do our due diligence, which
Yeah.
we're still
Well,
under
we'll
our
still have to
budget,
do our due
but we're
diligence,
still
which
under
I
our
think is
budget.
about 2,000.
$1,950.
We're
yes.
still well within what we allocated in the budget. So,
And that's with going with package 3.
all right then.
Are there any other extras that we're
Despite
missing?
appearances. Oh,
Before,
that?
are there any other extras that we're missing? Any other add-ons that we have not discussed? I don't want us to walk away today.
No.
Okay.
So just the due diligence would be the only
The
other
due
thing.
diligence is the next one, or what will come up, and after that, no, that's it.
Are we missing any other district expenses other than the search itself? Is there anything
Oh.
local that we're not thinking of?
We're not taking in consideration their travel,
Their travel.
Their
Right.
travel.
Okay.
but I still think
But we're
we
still.
still have 6,000.
50,000 is our target number. We're
Mm-hmm.
we're still okay. I think we actually approximated fairly well on that.
How much
And
is your travel usually?
They said about
approximate?
4,500 last
We'd
time.
we'd estimated about 4,500 for the two of us.
And we have to keep in mind, even though we've budgeted 1,000, that not everybody's going to
Right.
have to utilize the full amount.
And I would be open to the possibility that there are those who will come in underneath that, and if there are others who come in a couple hundred higher than that, that we can use those same resources.
Right. And this is not, the advertising part is not the area that we want to nickel and dime.
Personally, I'm not a fan of nickel and diming
Well,
in various places, like.
you know what? A penny turns to a nickel turns to a quarter.
I
A
agree,
quarter turns to a
and
dollar.
this is the most significant decision we as a board will make, and if this is the one we want to get right.
Right. And that's why I do suggest that we go with package 3.
And that does not mean I'm not cost-sensitive or cost-conscious. It
No.
means this decision is enormous.
And I wouldn't say that.
Thank you. Just want to be clear for anybody who's watching, listening.
No. I'm just talking from my personal.
No, I get it. There's cameras, there's
Yes, I
reporters,
know.
you know.
Mrs.
Let's just be
Barrenborg, do you
clear.
have any input
Oh, from the person that's watching?
on the package 1, 2, or 3?
Yeah, I think, Dr. Schiff, you did some calculation. In that calculation, did you consider the cost it would take for bringing in the finalists and the semifinalists?
Yes, I did. I mean, I can tell
Okay.
you what my rough calculations were. I just don't, but yes, I did.
Okay, so we're still under budget.
We should be.
I think,
I think we'll come in right around budget. The only thing I did not consider was the HYA expenses, but I think we're still okay.
okay, so then I think when we get to due diligence, I think that's the most crucial part of this whole thing. And I think what we've read out there on other searches is why we need to be very diligent in doing the due diligence part.
Okay. I think we're all, so package 1, 2, or 3?
I think
We're on advertising still, Terry.
Mrs. Barrenborg? Okay.
I know, I understand that, and I'm all for package 3. I also know that we were looking at total budget
Okay.
and to consider that, so that's
Okay.
why I said that. Because I don't chime in much. I didn't chime in for the first hour. So I just want to make sure I was able to say that before you get to that discussion.
Okay.
everything that I can see here brings us at just about what we budgeted or a little bit under.
All right. Dr. Adams, what's next?
Just for clarification, package 3, Alice Nasby.
Yes.
Thank you. The next item is the due diligence. We recommend on the finalist, unless you get 2 that you just can't make up a decision about, or not make a decision, but you want you want to make sure you have every bit of information before you make a decision. There are two packages. You can bring them up. One is the basic. The only difference between the basic and the comprehensive package is the comprehensive package gives you the news media review, the 5-year review, and the social media review. But it includes the personal profile summary, the Social Security trace, county criminal record, federal criminal record, county civil record, Department of Motor Vehicles, education degree verification, TransUnion credit report, aliases for the past 7 years, investigation of jurisdictions of residence, education, employment past 7 years, university and academic program accreditation, national criminal record history, national sex offender search, executive summary, and then the news media, as I mentioned before, is 5 years. And it says up to 20, but they're up to 30 articles they'll do, and a social media review.
Okay. Do we need to make this particular decision right now?
You don't have to, but we recommend you decide on at least on your finalists that you're going to do a due diligence report.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting to not do a due diligence, just which package and whether or not we have one or more candidates, we don't know. We can make it, it's fine, but it's going to be a while before we get to this moment.
Get down to one candidate, say we do the comprehensive review. I mean, do it. If you're going to do it, do it. I mean, we get down to one. If we have two,
For the final.
for the final
The
person.
comprehensive.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. If you have two and you can't make a room, I mean, I don't disagree with you, Mara. I mean, you know, I think we all know we're going to want to do the background check. It's just, what's the difference in the price?
$800. And the only reason, the difference is the news media review and the social media review.
It's probably just Googled.
Yeah, which may or may not be more than Googling. I'm fairly adept myself, but I'm not going to volunteer to do this. But, you know, this is.
How much do you cost?
Right. I'm free. And most of us will do this anyway. I mean, on our own. Well, I don't know. Maybe not
I'd be
everybody
curious
spends
what
as
the
much
social
time
media review
on a computer as I do. But I don't know. We can make it now, or we can.
I'm just thinking if we're going national,
Yeah.
we don't know, it's not like we can call someone up and tell Tallahassee and say.
No, but, you know, Google,
I'm just-
Facebook, Twitter,
I
all
know.
of that is national. I mean, I can. Anyway,
Yeah,
whatever.
well, we can,
Let's make the decision at the time. We have the
Yeah.
intention that we will do a
Yeah,
review.
I mean, I'm
and
by no means suggesting we not do it. I'm just saying we've made a lot of decisions. It's,
You decision fatigued?
I'm decision fatigued, yes. I am.
Okay.
And we've
This
got,
would be
you know,
the
90,
last one.
we've got a
We're
whole
about to
other
talk
meeting to
about
go.
salary, so giddy up.
8 minutes.
That's fine, comprehensive then.
So is there no decision or a
We're
decision?
leaning toward comprehensive, but we're going to wait and not make that final decision.
All right, leaning. Okay.
You knew what you were getting into when you came.
Sure.
I mean, come on.
All right.
Yeah, if you researched us, you knew exactly what you were getting into.
We're not going to resolve the next item in 8 minutes, but I'd like to give you some food for thought. And we can put something in writing to give you a little more food for thought with this one. What we did, I reached out to the Florida School Administrators Association and got some information from them. Also, the Department of Ed has your average superintendent salaries for every county in Florida, along with the top positions in usually assistant soups and so forth. And this is the 2018-19 salaries. And this is the latest iteration. It's the number 3 one. We then also looked at the most recent census information on county populations and took that into consideration. and then went to Wikipedia and looked back at what they had in terms of the U.S. Census information about wealth in each of the counties and household income, and that information is a range from 2006 to 2010, so that's somewhat dated. The rest of it's all current. So with that, what I did was take any of the counties that touched Indian River County, and then added one because I looked at the coastal counties, because your competition is really the coastal counties more than those that are most adjacent to you inland. So we looked at Brevard, which is huge. We know the size. It's almost 600,000 people. Obviously, Indian River County. We looked at Martin, although it's below St. Lucie, and there was a reason for that. Right now, Martin, as we said early on, has a state appointed. They're going to, and so that'll change because they're locked in salary-wise. We looked at Okeechobee, which is not typical, but it touches. And we looked at Osceola and St. Lucie. So if you look at that and you look at the current salaries, well, Brevard's at 210,000. You're 161,200. Martin right now is 129,511. Okeechobee is 109,125. Osceola is 202,470.
Can you slow down a minute? Because I just need to see this visually.
I'll put this in a
Okay.
document to you. And I'll explain why, to give you the rationale so that when you get the document, you know what this rationale in my head was, at least. And if you look at St. Lucie, 182,320. Now, again, if you look at the populations, Brevard almost 600,000, you're about 157,000, Martin's about 160,000. Okeechobee, 41,000, Osceola, 367, almost 368,000 people, and St. Lucie, 321,000. But then if we look at the per capita income, Brevard's number 16, you're number 7, Martin's number 3, Okeechobee's 41, Osceola's 40, and St. Lucie's 32.
Do you have Marion or Flagler County on there? Marion or Flagler?
No.
That's our competition.
Which we certainly can, we can expand the written document. I'm just trying to put out some figures that you can do all the checks on that. So the first thing I did with those 6 counties was add up all the salaries and divide by 6. And what do you come up with as an average? Well, you come up with an average, and this is just to put you in the ballpark. You come up with an average of $165,771, and then you say, well, that was 18, 19. You're into 19, 20, and then you're going to actually be looking at somebody that's going to be starting likely mid-year. And then probably the salary that you prorate for that first half of the year, you're probably going to do something very similar in the second part of it. So I said, well, if you added 3% a year, where would that take you? So I said, well, let's be conservative. Let's add 2.5% a year. So I multiplied 165,771 by 1.05, and that comes up to $174,059. So then I took a different look at it and said, well, what if we just took the coastal counties and added them together and divided by 4? And when I do that, I come up with a base of 168,875, and when I multiply that by 1.05, I get 177,319. Final calculation that I did was just to take the adjacent coastal counties and add them together, and that adds up. Well, it adds up to 553,000. You divide by 3, you get 169,260, and if you multiply by 1.05, you come out to $184,506. So,
No, that's interesting. Don't finish. I'm sorry.
So essentially, what I wanted to do was give you a range of numbers. I have a number that I'd recommend to be competitive. I don't know that you're ready to hear that number.
Well, I'm not really, I understand, I'm looking at how you're coming up with the calculations, but I'm not really seeing a lot of, financial logic behind it, because the way we look at things is per student. So let's say Brevard County, if they have 150,000 students, divide that into the salary. St. Lucie County, if they have 50,000, divide that. And then I look at bringing that together and looking at the average. I don't really see and I follow what you were doing, but I don't see the logic in
I'll tell you the reason we don't do that in terms of a per pupil cost. When you're running a $300 million operation, or you're running a county operation, you're running that operation in a one way. When you look at Brevard County, for example, and if you look at the chart that came out, it lists all the assistants that they have that are making $150,000, $160,000, $170,000. So if we're going to be fair and use the logic of a per student cost, then you look at the support people or the other people that they have on staff that add up to that total salary. And I guess you could do that as a per pupil. I look at it as, what do you need to be competitive given the size of the district, the budget that you have in the district, and the responsibilities to run an organization of this size.
Yeah. Thank you. I totally agree with you. I think that's such an interesting point. I understand what you're saying. We have level funding in the state of Florida, so regardless of what the ad valorem tax is, what we are able to garner in here in Indian River County, we get the same funding. So that part is just the reality of the situation. I totally agree with you. I think our salary is not where it needs to be, especially considering cost of living. The next question we're going to talk about is residency expectations. So that's going to be something to take into consideration. We will be competing with other districts. Brevard had an internal candidate that took that job that was serving as an assistant superintendent. They may have affected the salary that was offered and that ultimately was decided upon, just to put that out there, and that was 210. I'd like to hear the number.
Yeah.
What's the number that you're recommending?
Let me hold on. Let me
I'm
hold on to
finding
the
it.
table.
I'm all right.
I think to be truly competitive nationally, you should be at 185.
Oh, wow.
No,
I thought you were going to say 175.
not gonna go.
Now, could you in the 175 area be competitive? Absolutely. I know what's out there, and
Can you say 175 and then if someone comes with the experience, I mean, I think that's something that you're going to look at. If someone comes to us and they're just knocking it out of the park and we need to offer them 180 or to do it, then that's a decision we're going to make at that time.
We're at 161.
We need to
and-
offer more.
Well, I'm not saying more, but I am not, I look at how much have we increased the cost of living for our teachers? How much have we increased the cost of living for our students and our support staff? I am not willing to go that much at all.
Neither am I, and our teachers have not had, our teachers, and not just our teachers. We're in the middle of negotiations now with everything else. No.
I'm not saying 185. I think we need to increase. My position is I think we need to increase the salary in order to be competitive and get the best candidate. This is not the position to, this argument that somehow, I have heard before people say, oh my gosh, I can't believe the superintendent makes $160,000 a year, and your teachers only make X, Y, Z. This is the person that is running the entire district. It's a $300 million budget. It's an enormous amount of responsibility, and it is someone that has worked their entire career to get to the pinnacle of their profession. I mean, you're looking for the top of the top of, I mean, this is it. This is the job. So I want to be competitive. I don't want somebody to look at I mean, this is the thing that will make it or break it. They will look at if it's 161, they're going to look at it and be like, yeah, that's nice, but, you know, I'm making 170, 175. Why am I going to take a hit to live somewhere where the cost of living is expensive? That's my opinion on it. I mean, and I don't say that lightly, but it's an important position, and it needs, the compensation needs to be adequate.
Coming from out of state, our taxes are different. Okay, so when I left New York, and I was an assistant principal there, I left at, I don't know, I think my salary was $99,000 as an assistant, 98 and change as an assistant principal. When I came down here and became an assistant principal, I thought, I'm never going to make the same amount of money. And the salary line, base salary, was not anywhere near what my base was in New York City. However, because the taxes are very different, I was coming home with the same amount that I was coming home in New York. Just a slight change. I was shocked. But I had not taken into consideration that taxes are different. Also, we are a county that is a fairly small county. There are a lot of other things that will attract candidates to our county that we should not dismiss. Had Dr. Rendell not made certain decisions, I suppose he still would be here at $161,000 doing the same work. We got Dr. Moxley. I wish Dr. Moxley would stay.
Well,
But
and
all I'm saying is I am willing to consider a little more if that's the case, but I certainly do not believe that we should go into the 70s. And I think that we should take care of our teachers and our staff and get that out of the way first before we even go there. And if it changes our calendar, then it changes our calendar. But
go ahead, Dr. Schiff.
This is one of those decisions that I feel like is difficult to make without the financial guy in the room.
yeah.
I'd like to know what the options are. I'd like to know what the actual, the implications for the budget. And this is a conversation I would prefer to have with Mr. Fagan in the room. And I'd also be interested in if she's comfortable hearing Dr. Moxley's opinion on this.
That's a really hard one to give, I will tell
know.
you, because I am in a completely different opinion, a different position than anybody coming in, and I'm not having to move here, and I'm not having to uproot my family and leave, a different state to come, and those kinds of things. I know I can speak to what I was making in Lake County, and when I left, they upped that salary substantially from where I was. To attract, because they were in a situation where they wanted the highest quality. So again, I am very different than the average person with that. So I'm not really the one to take the opinion on, to be honest.
We're
So
also
can
going to
I-
be competing with how many other districts that are going to be recruiting?
So when I was looking at this, I'm going to put a number out there that I was looking at, and now I'm not feeling that I felt it was high, but now I'm not feeling it was high. It was 168. So that was the number that I was willing to go to, but I'm not willing to go over that.
Can we not have a range? I mean,
Yeah, I think also this is a bigger conversation. This conversation, again, is not, this conversation is as much about attracting a superintendent and what we want to offer a superintendent as it is about public perception. And I think this is a deeper conversation. It's not a conversation I think that we make hastily. I think there are many things we consider: who we're going to attract, from where, cost of moving, cost of living, implications. We're at a variety of interesting and difficult financial moments right now. The ad is not going in until after the leadership
thing is completed, correct?
You really don't need to make a decision, and that's why I rattled off the numbers, realizing
Yeah.
it's later, you've been here for a while, you had a meeting this morning.
We have
and
another one
fatigue-
yet to go.
Fatigue sets in, so I didn't deliberately schedule this way. So, and we can certainly put together these figures. We'll add Marion and Flagler. You need to give it a lot of thought. Yes, get the financial person in, but if you want to be competitive, you got to be higher than where you are now.
Well, how do we know if we're competitive? Because we got, if I looked at the fact that when we had our interim search, there are many applicants on there that were very highly qualified, that were willing to accept what we were offering, to take the position, not only as interim, but they were looking long-term. I think we're jumping ahead of ourselves here and trying to put this large number out there, and if we've not even put the ad out there, if we didn't have the quality apply, then we will come back to the board, just like we did with the CFO, and then we would, we're unlimited funds. We're not a corporation that, has endless profits. Our profits are dwindling. They're not increasing. Our student enrollment is shrinking. So go ahead.
Okay. I think that the quality of the candidates that, I think Dr. Moxley and a few others notwithstanding, there was, the applicants for the interim position were specifically for interim, and they were all over the place. And I don't know how many I saw that are going to actually apply for this type of a search, for this type, this is a different animal, this search. And so I think the quality of the candidates that we're going to see is going to be significantly different. And I think that it would be appropriate to look at a range of salary, and this is my opinion going forward, and we can talk about this more, obviously, to look at a range of salary and then perhaps some type of a relocation, if the case is that we decide to hire someone from out of state, some type of a relocation package.
Yes, I agree with that.
But, and I think that may be appropriate, but I do think, I will state publicly, I do think that we are low in salary, and again, I think the quality of the candidates we are going to see and that we want to attract. I've said before, my expectations are like super high here, Dr. Adams, right? And I don't want to tie your hands with it. If you as a professional are saying in order for us to be competitive, we need to be at a certain salary, so be it. We're going to very soon, we're going to know what these other districts are going to be offering. And and people are going to look at the other districts. They're going to look at Martin and Indian River, and the student size isn't going to make as much of a difference to them. If Martin's that much higher than us.
You may not know what Martin and Marion are
'cause
going
it's
to,
too late,
because
too
they're currently under an elected superintendent, and that's set by the state.
Right.
So until they may not set their salary, until January, I don't know. But I'm just saying,
But
that's the
Flagler.
unknown. Flagler you do, because that's already an appointed. There are some other districts in the state of Florida that are closer to your,
Volusia.
well, Volusia is,
large.
we do know where they are. They have set their salary. We do know that. I can go online and pull that. But they're also, 75,000.
Well, I
They're
think-
bigger than us. They're just
They're-
the one closest in time
Yeah.
frame to us.
And your point was interesting. I think we should look at the history of the salary in Indian River County, where we've been and where we are now, and then your point of when Lake County worked with Ray and Associates, they did a national search, and you said they significantly raised the salary in order to get the right candidate. I think that's something that we need to look at. While we are an attractive district, we are not without our challenges in many different ways, and I think that's something that we need to be aware of.
I'm sorry, I just always get really emotional about money because I want, the instinct is to let's get the best for the least amount of cost so that we can put those dollars directly into the classroom. So, I'm sorry that I get a little excited about this, I appreciate your research and information. Don't take it personal,
No,
okay?
I don't.
I think that's such a good point, Mrs. Zork, that you say, because you do want the resources to go into the classroom, but without, what is that expression, the fish rots from the head? And that's a horrible thing to say, but it's true. If your leader, it's true, I'm sorry. You don't, if you don't have the right leadership, setting the right example and the right person in that position, as we have seen in the past however long, we had a superintendent that people did not have faith in, and it just, I mean, it was not good for anybody in this community. So if we have to raise the salary to get the best candidate in, to make sure that we are headed in the right direction to steer the ship, that affects classrooms, that affects teachers, that affects families.
But I also know that I would love to drive a Mercedes S400, but, you know, even though that's my desire and I would love to do that, you know.
Yeah, we're not talking about
expectation-
offering 250 though. We're talking about
We're
161 to 175 or 185. We're not talking about, I'm
You know,
not
I'm
going
That's a
from a
lot.
Kia to a Mercedes. We're not
Yeah,
talking about
that's,
that.
That's a lot.
We're still
you
not
know,
offering.
I just think 185, when you said that, I'm like,
It's
that
a
made
lot.
me nervous. 175, still, I'm a little nervous. But
To propose, I'd like to see the data, I'd like to do a little research myself. I'd like to have conversations with Mr. Fagan in the room. Could we table this conversation
Absolutely.
until the next time we're together and we're immersed in the process?
yes, absolutely, I think that
Not a
was the
problem at all.
intention.
As I said when I rattled off the numbers, when you
Yeah.
asked me to slow down, I didn't expect you to make a decision, but I think it was
just
important that I got the one number out so that,
Right, no, it's good. It's great that you gave us that, and we
Yes,
have,
it is.
you've disabused us of any notion of what I think we thought maybe we were going in about, but I think we also need some time to digest and think about and research it.
this can be done on September 24th.
Sure.
In the meantime, I'll get this information out, add a little more to it. We'll distribute it to you, talk to your financial person. And I do recommend that when you come out, two things. One, I don't recommend that we go out with a salary and then wait to see who comes in and change it. I think whatever you decide on, good, bad, indifferent, is what we should go with, or what you should go with. I think the second part of that is that we go with a range, and you can take a range from a dollar amount. We have found that, you know, let's say you said, well, we're going to go from 150 to 185. That's not a good thing.
No.
Generally, pick a number, and, you know, if it's in the range of 175, we have seen situations where it's much easier if you have somebody that you really want, has been an assistant, maybe hasn't been in, but it's who you want. You might go down a little lower, and then you might go up just a little higher if it's that experienced person that you want here for the next 10 years.
But if we have a range, we're not going above the range. The range sets that cap.
Well, what we suggest is don't tie your hands. It's not, you know, say in the range of, and we always say in the range of whatever the number is. And it's just what we have found works, and you can do whatever you want. In the range of, and then we say based on qualifications, experience, credentials, and subject to negotiations. It's always subject to negotiation. But if you don't have a number to go out that's going to at least bring people in, then you're not able to negotiate. That's why we say in the range of. It's not a top stop, it's not a bottom stop. It can be lower than that, it can be higher than that. That's what we have found works. You're going to talk about this, you'll make a decision.
Yeah, and people who are not in our district and don't know our district, and it's not you, just in general, the concept is that, I guess people assume to know all the answers and assume to think that we're a rich county, and we're not. We have an incredibly high budget, but that doesn't mean that we are, that doesn't mean that we have the extra funds to be able to say, sure, let's just give somebody $175,000 and we're in the hole someplace else, or next year, you know, when the charter school comes in and we're, you know, losing X amount of money, but we're still giving our superintendent $185,000, you know, and we're losing, what, 500 students? Something's wrong there. I mean, we've got to think long-term, and I agree that we should table this until another time.
So what is, clearly, we have more opportunity for conversation and discussion here. I think we need to bring this back to a discussion before we get consensus. And I think for the moment, we don't know the number now. We have strong feelings about it. We need to talk more about it.
When do we want to have the second follow-up conversation to finish this up?
Well, you can finish, if you're willing to make a decision on it, September 24th.
That's our
Do
next,
we have
that's our next scheduled in-person
Okay.
with Dr. Adams is on the 24th.
A workshop?
And it's a workshop setting. And it will be to finalize salary, the leadership, they will bring you, if I understand correct, Dr. Adams, the leadership profile. All the online survey will be done, the focus groups will be done because you gave the date you wanted, or the timeline for that. So that's now all their work now. It's going to be on that, so they'll be, now, I don't know, Dr. Adams, I don't want to speak for you, but if you're going to be back in the district on the 10th, 11th, and 12th, would you like to use any of that time to meet with the board and we do a special meeting to come back and talk about any of this?
We
That
certainly-
would be the only
I
other
was going
thing.
to say, we have a board discussion set for the 10th. We could have some of that conversation with or without Dr. Adams, because ultimately, this is our decision, and we will give him a number. So we could allocate some board discussion, that was what sounded like I was interrupting you, sorry.
No.
But
September
September 10th, we
during the
have board
workshop.
discussion. Why don't we include that on our agenda? If Dr. Adams is not otherwise engaged with community meetings,
We can block that out, either Dr. Brown or myself, certainly. I'd be
Well,
happy
I
to.
think
great
that,
It's
like
another
you
day that
said,
you're coming in. That'll take one day out of our
no,
consulting days,
he's
right?
already coming those days. It's
Oh,
just whether
oh.
or not he spends it with us or out doing
Oh,
focus groups.
right.
So we would take
Okay,
that
I
2-hour
gotcha.
window or whatever you
Or
wanted
whatever
to allot
portion of
for
it.
that.
And that's a conversation we could have with or without Dr. Adams here.
yeah, we need to have it with our CFO.
Okay,
All right. That's actually,
that works
I
better.
like that a lot better than waiting until the
I agree.
24th.
I
That's perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Residency expectations.
God, there's more.
Oh.
I thought we were.
No.
I don't want
Done, we're
any,
21.
and I don't know if you feel the same way. If you're not willing to live in Indian
I
River
agree.
County and be a part of this county, then you're not,
I agree. I
you're
think
not
residency should.
someone I'm interested in.
I'm going to say something that will upset you.
Oh,
Again,
okay.
I'm going to say, well, if we're going to pay $185,000, we expect you to spend it here in Indian River County.
Well, absolutely.
I have no problem with that,
The
personally.
168 we're gonna pay you, we expect you to spend it here in the county.
And I, obviously
Yeah,
being
Bre-
facetious with
Brevard had,
Maria.
Brevard's previous superintendent did not ever relocate. He used to travel from like, I don't know if it was like Martin or somewhere up to Brevard
In Palm Beach.
in Palm Beach. But I mean,
Broward.
yeah, Broward. I mean, I just think, I don't know. I mean, yeah, Indian River, I mean, I think they should be a part of the community. I think it's helpful. I mean,
We can, when we couch the advertising, expect it to become a part of the community and address it in that way.
I have no problem with saying expected to relocate to our community, personally.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on that one?
do we give them like Secret Service when they go to the supermarket? Or I'm just kidding. That was a
You know,
joke.
every other superintendent has survived it, so I'm pretty sure this one will.
No doubt.
Transition services, we'll cover it at a later time, and never really intended to put that, or have that discussed. Would like to try and just have you look at the calendar. We've resolved the issue on when we're doing the stakeholder meetings. We can put the, as scheduled, August 30, the survey up, because we know the 6 categories. And would just ask that you commit to the dates where it says special meeting in green. And if you can lock those in on your calendars,
Yeah, those are helpful when Mrs. Esplin sends us those, because otherwise I get
We
them.
can send them in a calendar invite if that works easiest for you.
Some of these, however, you mentioned, you have a couple of these here on Saturdays which you mentioned takes into consideration board members who are unavailable during the week. That's not the case for most of us who are available during the week, however.
So what I hear you saying.
There's one on Saturday, November 16th. That's a semifinalist interview. I mean, I'm fine with it, but, and then there is, not sure if that was the only one.
That's the only one, and I think that was backed up to reduce travel.
What does that mean, backed up to reduce travel?
It's cheaper to fly on a Saturday.
In other words, the reason for that, if you were going to have candidates in on the 14th, and then you were going to do whatever follow-up you were going to do, if you were to keep them here, if they were from out of state, you'd have them in that Saturday. And
So we're giving candidates hold on, initial interviews so the presumption is that the semifinalists,
Would be interviewed on Thursday, and then you'd interview your top 2 or 3
so they
again
would
on
stay
Saturday.
till Saturday.
So we're paying for 2 overnights, not 1 overnight. We initially said 1 overnight because
have to
we
come
only
back.
needed
They'd have
them
to
here.
No, this
is
is
cheaper.
actually more cost-effective than having them come
Yeah,
back.
it
But
is.
it requires then that they be flexible enough, they either don't have a return ticket, they get a charge for a return, that's, and if we are, where are we making the slate is presented on the 6th. We're interviewing on the 14th, which gives them less than a week to organize their life, get tickets, and come.
Yeah.
Okay, again,
That's pretty
in light of
standard.
that, plane tickets will be expensive, just want to, I mean, that's the conversation we had earlier. And then they may or may not be staying until the 17th, but they won't know that until after the 14th.
So then how would they know to stay?
They don't.
we tell the candidates, if you're selected, you'll be required to be there that Saturday or whatever day you decide. It just gives you time in between. When Broward did it, it was cheaper for them. They did exactly with the hotel. They got government rates at a hotel that they use for whatever travel when they bring people in. And the candidates were just told, if you're selected for the next session, it was less expensive to pay for an extra day at the hotel in Fort Lauderdale than it was to have them fly out and fly back.
Right, and then, though, in fairness, we have to pay for them to change their ticket. Because if they had planned to fly in, I mean, it's nickel and diming, I know.
But here's what you do. You know you've got 8, let's pick the number 8. You've got a slate of 8 coming in. You book the rooms for the 2 nights for all 8 of them,
Yeah.
okay? It is much cheaper, and you work that out with a hotel.
No, I'm not worried
Yeah,
about the hotel.
yeah, oh, okay.
No,
okay.
this is the
But see,
plan.
they're doing their plane. Well, then they know that they're here. I mean,
You buy a ticket. that
you buy a ticket, they buy a
So they just buy a
ticket.
ticket presuming they're leaving Sunday and they're.
That's correct, and if they don't,
Lovely
then
weekend
they're
and-
having a lovely weekend, yeah.
4 nights. They would be in Wednesday night, interview Thursday, stay in Friday, Saturday, and leave Sunday. That's 4 nights.
Can we, it's, we're,
Talking about
Which
this
one?
earlier, we were talking about 1 night, now we're
I
on
know,
4. I wish we
but-
would have had this conversation
Yeah.
then.
we need to,
Well, and
Do I
we're
have
not
it?
locked in. We can have more or we are. Okay.
maybe we can finish this conversation on the 10th.
What-
Yeah,
the-
this is
the-
a couple of months off yet.
Yeah.
The problem is, it may be a couple of months off for you, but I also have a calendar, and Dr. Brown has a calendar. And one of the reasons we tried to put this together and we sent it out in advance, so you had it before this meeting, was so that you could start to look at those dates. When you're doing something this important, whether it's 1 night or 4 nights, it's
That's,
inconsequential.
But when we were having the conversation about how many nights they would be here, that's when it gonna be here one night, they'll be here 4 nights because we have this special weekend where we're gonna require them all to be here for, through the
Well,
weekend.
yeah,
And then
perha-
this way, we would have had that conversation then.
Yeah, perhaps, maybe it would have been better to schedule the calendar first and then have everything follow the
And
calendar.
also, frankly, we all were able to take a look at this, but we can't have any conversation about it until we're sitting in a room like this. We're not allowed to have that conversation, so we couldn't have done it any sooner.
What's the difference in the price of a ticket to be able to change it?
150, if you're lucky, and then the cost of the new airfare.
So that would be cheaper than 4 nights hotel,
Well,
so then
I-
everybody
I-
just books a ticket that they can change the date on if they need to. So you book is that not correct?
I can, yes, it all depends. After Labor Day, the prices that come down to fly here, the closest airport is West Palm. We fly into Orlando, generally, came down, I think, for $56.
Stanford is also cheaper. Stanford.
That's really
Okay,
far.
we're not,
We're getting into the weeds
Yeah,
here.
this is- my
Let's-
goodness.
Let's try to, I understand you all have your schedule, but this is,
Yeah, I mean, and the issue is not, does the schedule work for us? It's fine, it's just we cannot have a conversation about what we're comfortable with until we're sitting in this room. So it forces us, unfortunately, to be less efficient than we would like. It's just, it's inefficient, I get it, I totally agree with you, but.
I think the other thing too is I try and put my hat on as an applicant.
Yep.
And I'm applying for superintendency. I don't put my eggs all in one basket either. So if I'm really serious about being a superintendent, I am applying for multiple places at the same time.
Right.
And I think that's the other thing too, is that, the back-to-back, I mean, it seems tight and condensed. I don't care what time frame that is. I understand we're saving on travel and that kind of thing, but it also, from an applicant, I know if I'm really serious about this job, but if I'm not going to be the selected candidate, then I'm moving to the next, situation, or I'm having to decide.
Yep.
And I'm having to decide, okay, if this process is so long, then I'm going to have to start choosing. And it may or may not be, Indian River. That's the thing that, with so many searches in Florida going on, it's a different conversation than probably we would have.
Is this a decision that is pressing in time before the 10th
well,
of September?
he's saying that they have to plan their travel and their schedule too, but can I, before, the more I'm thinking about this, if we've finalized our candidates and they have 3 days in between, they have 3 days to get to know this community.
Agreed.
And, so I do see a benefit to that, to have them here those 3 days, because, I don't want them to come in, go straight to the airport and leave. I want them to.
You want them to want the job?
Yeah, I want them
wanna
to
live
get
here.
to know Indian River County, and is this really a place they want to come to? So
For the salary we're gonna offer.
So,
right, let's have them fall in love with the county, and then,
and I'll tell you, when I was applying the first time for Lake County, they did 5. They brought 5 in, and then they took it down to 2. And so when the 5 applicants came in, we committed to a 2-day process. 1 day was for an interview, but the second day, a district person was assigned to us, and they took us, and we visited schools, we visited key places in the community, we got a tour around the district, so it was a one interview time with the board, but it was a 2-day process and even though I lived there, I didn't need to go around, but I was looking at it differently than I had been. And so that, you can do something, I didn't mean to kind
Are
of.
you
but
volunteering to be the person?
You can
Well,
use the
yeah,
time
yeah.
wisely, and
You
that's a
can,
great,
and
that's
to
a
your
great way.
point.
There's 2 points. The time can be used wisely and get the people to know and see every aspect of the county, not just the beaches, not just the
Right.
rural areas, everything. And the other thing that if you prolong the process at this point, it's not about not doing the due diligence, it's about losing candidates. I think I mentioned to you in Beaufort, the two top candidates, the board had a difficulty in deciding. The candidate that didn't get the job there a week later was hired by Rochester, New York. So it's, although people are serious, if they're ready to make that move, sometimes they are in multiple searches.
But, and I just want to say again, I think it's really important that we don't micromanage Hazard Young and Dr. Adams and Dr. Brown, because we've hired them to do a job. They're the ones who know how to do it. And so if they're going to give us advice on moving faster on something, especially as we start going through this process or doing something, I think it's going to be important that we take their advice. Take their advice. I think we should let, you hire someone to do a job, now we need to let them do it, and we need to listen to what they're saying.
Okay, so everybody okay with the schedule as is?
Yes.
Okay.
And board members, I would say, I'm in a unique situation for you, because I'm not a participant in it. I'm an interim, and I'm here to help support you to do whatever. If you know, whatever you need me to do, typically I know the outgoing superintendent is not even at the table during these discussions. And so, but I'm in a different situation, so I can do whatever you need me to do to support Dr. Adams and whatever they need. If you want me to stand back and not have any role in it, I'm okay with that too. I mean, that's what I'm used to, but again, I can be, you know, here to serve you
We're
and
very
Dr.
lucky.
Adams.
I think we're very lucky to
So,
have you at the
whatever
table
you
helping
need.
to be a part of it, so
So.
thank you.
And just so everyone knows, the candidate, if they could be just like her, then we're gonna win.
You know, the state board told us that about Eric Smith, when Eric Smith was the commissioner. And they said, just clone Eric and we'll be happy.
Pretty much, well, I'll speak for.
For
That's
myself.
pretty much how we feel, I think, at this point, although I cannot speak for my fellow board members.
Well, thank you
Okay.
all for your perseverance and sticking to it. We got through a lot, and we can, on the 10th, if you'd like one of us here, or certainly I can be here as part of that, we'll block that piece out. If you want us here, if you don't, that's fine too.
I think you're an important part of the conversation. You're going to be doing the recruiting, and any decisions we make are going to affect your ability to do your job.
I actually don't know, but I do not, that's a conversation we can have without them, and if their time is better spent in the community interviewing others, I'd rather it be spent that way,
I disagree.
so.
Sure.
Okay.
Whatever you decide.
Well, we need to call this meeting at 4:36. Thank you.